I never thought a swipe on Tinder would pull me into the longest nightmare of my life. When I walked into his simple dorm room, the initial atmosphere was quite warm. We sat close together, almost cuddling. After a long and bad relationship, I just wanted to have fun, even though I was in college, but not really committed. Afterward, I still sat there, my body trembling with prolonged fear, my heart pounding as if the darkness was still clinging to me. I lay close to Joe, awkwardly seeking a little comfort from my best friend, even though I knew he didn't believe in such things. Finally, exhaustion pulled me into sleep, but the dream was full of blurry images, as if the black shadow was still lurking somewhere. The next morning, when sunlight streamed through the window, I tried to explain it to myself. Self about what had happened, wondering if it was a dream or a semi-conscious state. Part of me wanted to believe it was just an illusion, but the feeling of being awake when I first saw the light made me unable to deny it. At breakfast, I recounted the story to the family, trying to laugh it off and say I was probably going crazy to make things sound lighter. But Joe's grandmother looked at me with a knowing smile, her voice soft. "Oh, maybe you did see something." My father passed away in the basement of this house. I've seen him down there a few times too. Those words sent a chill down my spine, as if she had just opened another door, confirming that the darkness wasn't just imagination, and it was still present in this house. Then the story shifts to a new chapter when I was about 17, and my habit was to go for walks at night when I felt sad or down, listening to lonely music to heal myself, although I feel a bit silly saying that. I used to work at a hotel restaurant and hated it. Then friends suggested working as a receptionist at a brothel. It's completely legal here. I would often walk through the field near the old elementary school, a familiar place where I could sit on the swings, look at the stars, and try to find meaning in life. The field was surrounded by a wooden fence with a few entrances and exits. Walking towards one opening, I looked ahead and saw the strangest thing. About 40 feet away, a man in a tuxedo and top hat suddenly stood there leaning against the fence with the weirdest smile I had ever seen. Why would someone dressed like that be at an elementary school at night? I felt more strange than scared, but couldn't help but wonder. I turned off the music so I could hear any movement, then started walking towards another exit, trying to avoid his gaze. I looked down at the ground for a second to avoid those eyes, and when I looked up, he had completely disappeared as if he had never existed. My heart sank, and I realized that even from that distance, I should have heard him move or jump over the fence. But there was nothing, just terrifying silence. After a few seconds of processing, I ran straight home, my heart pounding, and although I still walked on that path afterward, I never saw that happen again. Moving on to another chapter, when I was about 20, I was doing missionary work for the church in South Carolina and Georgia. The job pays well, fits my school schedule, and isn't difficult. The good thing is I can kick out customers if they're rude, unlike having to be polite all the time in the service industry. That work involved walking the streets, knocking on doors, and sharing my beliefs. I know this can bother some people, but we did it out of faith and a desire to spread it. I hope people can be respectful even if they don't agree. Once while walking in the suburbs of Augusta, Georgia, we met a strange man about 30 years old with skin that had unusual bumps like a character in some story. When we talked, he asked if we could pray for his house, explaining that things had been difficult recently because he had an uncle who used to live with him. That uncle had gone to prison for a serious crime, and that seemed to leave a heavy darkness in the house. This story is still unfinished as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become constant entities creeping through every moment of daily life, turning familiar shelters into haunting abysses, where curiosity can lead us into the heart of fear and memories of ghosts merge with reality, making everything blurry and hard to grasp. As I told the strange encounter with the man in the tuxedo and the chilling missionary experiences, now I will lead you through the next layers, where the story delves into the dark secrets of that house and then shifts to the narrator's journey into adulthood, where newfound freedom brings its own shadows. These stories are not just narratives, they are... Even so, the thought of working there makes me uneasy, as if the old fear is waiting in some hidden corner. Warnings from the abyss reminding us that sometimes we cannot escape what has touched our souls. When we entered the house, it was one of the rare times someone invited us in, especially in the oppressive heat of a Georgia summer where we seized every opportunity to rest. From the moment we stepped inside, I felt something was not right. The air was heavy, gloomy, with thick curtains covering the windows, and all the lights were off, plunging the house into darkness. We walked straight into the living room with a hallway to the right, and a large archway separating it from the dining room with only faint light from the back door at the end of the room, as if that was the only ray of hope in the enveloping darkness. The man sat and talked non-stop, not giving us a chance to interject, talking about his dream of becoming a rapper and how he experimented with music. I thought it was terrible, but I politely nodded and said it was a good idea. Then he explained why he invited us in. He was happy to have us there, because things had been strange recently. But then he said something that completely changed the atmosphere like a cold wind blowing through. As I said, my uncle went to prison for causing someone's death. Actually, it happened right in this house. And the traces of it are still on the sofa you are sitting on. Those words sent a chill down my spine. My hair stood on end, and a shiver ran through my body. I quickly glanced down at the sofa, and in the dim light I noticed dark stains, surely what he was referring to. I hadn't noticed them before because the light was too dim, but now they were like unhealed wounds evoking images of a dark past. I started the receptionist job at the brothel after seeing the job posting, had a quick interview, and was hired immediately. He continued talking about what he had been experiencing. Since then, I often see things flash in the corner of my eye, and it feels like a negative presence is always lurking. As soon as he finished speaking, something so fast it couldn't be human darted from one side of the room towards the kitchen, blocking the light from the back door for just a second like a living black shadow. He calmly said like that happens often. His voice sounded as if it was normal, but for me, it was a terrifying moment, as if the darkness had taken shape right before my eyes. At that moment, both my friend and I just wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. I quickly said we would pray for the house, and we did immediately, hoping that the prayer would bring some relief. Indeed, afterward, the air seemed a little less heavy, but the fear still clung, especially since we were sitting on that sofa. We quickly gave him our contact information, then left the house, our hearts pounding, not daring to look back. Then the story shifts to a new chapter. When I had just turned 19, and now at age 30, I am trying to live life to the fullest, a reaction to the limitations of the past. When I was little, my mother was overprotective, extremely controlling, not letting me go to places where kids my age usually hung out. The job is okay, not very interesting. The pay is acceptable for now. From when I was little until at least 16, I was mostly confined to the house or the small suburban neighborhood with no opportunity to explore the outside world. At 16, I was allowed to go out on weekends, but only if my brother, 3 years older, took care of me like a babysitter and I had to go with him and his friends. Nevertheless, being able to go out was a small liberation, allowing me to explore nighttime activities, a somewhat free experience I had never had before. I realized I was an overprotected child throughout my teenage years, but that didn't stop me from cherishing those moments. Then fast forward to age 18 when my mother finally allowed me to get my driver's license, a big step towards independence. Just a few weeks later I had my license, and that's when I started to feel real freedom, although it came with its own shadows. This story is still unfinished as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities, creeping through every stage of life, turning moments of newfound freedom into abysses filled with temptation and regret, where rebellion can lead us into a spiral of fear and memories of old ghosts, merge with new mistakes making everything chaotic and irreversible. I like the small perks like being able to smoke in the back or sit quietly to study. As I told the story of the haunting missionary experiences and the restrictive journey into adulthood, now I will lead you through the next layers, where freedom brings darker shadows, and a misty morning marks a fateful turning point where the line between reality and illusion blurs. These stories are not just narratives. They are whispers from the abyss reminding us that sometimes liberation can be the door to destruction. When I guess my mother realized that at 18 she couldn't control my life anymore, the car became a symbol of absolute freedom. I used it to go to work, drive friends who needed a ride, and found every reason to avoid going home, as if every trip was an escape from old constraints. But that freedom didn't always bring light. It led me down a dark path. Not long after getting my license, about a year, I started falling into a group of broken kids, as society called them, those considered aimless, lazy, with obvious problems like mental disorders, unable to keep a job, and involved with the law or deviant behaviors. I blended in with them mostly as a driver, but that quickly became boring and dangerous. Soon after, I also started experimenting with bad habits, like using mild stimulants most evenings, with friends driving around with drinks, listening to loud music at night, and not caring about any rules. Moments of evading checks from the authorities became a high, making me feel extremely powerful. But now looking back, I just see myself as a real idiot. Everything escalated quickly. In just a short time, I started with stronger substances like hallucinogenic drugs, leading to more reckless behavior. And then everything led to that fateful morning, an event that completely changed my life, shaking me to my core. I have to make it clear, the receptionist role is not doing other work. I am not the one providing that service, even though people might think so. Looking back, within a year, I had transformed from an overprotected teenager into someone arrogant, thinking I was invincible and caught up in foolish illusions. I invite you to sit back and prepare for the chaos to come. The scene takes place on a misty August morning with thick fog, humid, and damp weather in upstate New York. My hometown, with vast forests, secluded country roads, and winding paths through the trees, creating a space full of mystery and danger. I was in a post-hallucination state after a long night with hallucinogenic mushrooms. I'll call them Dave and Ray for the story. Dave was a tall, thin, red-haired guy, slightly bald, with a pretending to be tough personality. Aggressive, intimidating, and actually an idiot. In contrast, Ray was kind average looking, like a pretty boy, but always in trouble with the law for minor things, violating probation, which made him unable to involve any authorities if something happened. Around 7 a.m. As the sun was just rising, we were still awake after a long night, our bodies and minds tired, as if on autopilot, no longer able to think clearly. A zombie-like state while driving. We didn't talk much, just sat in silence, smoking and watching. The faint light of morning, as if waiting for something unpredictable. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I have no proof, but this is the truth. Although, thinking back, if it were a different story, it might be more exciting. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become indelible entities, creeping through every secluded road and reckless moment of youth, turning journeys of freedom into haunting chases, where curiosity can lead us into a spiral of terror, and memories of mistakes merge with new ghosts, making everything blurry and ominous. As I told the story of the escalation of dangerous habits and the mystical misty morning, now I will lead you through the next layers, where a chance encounter turns into a terrifying turning point, and forest roads become paths into the abyss. These stories are not just narratives. They are invitations from the darkness, reminding us that sometimes kindness can be a mask for lurking fear. After about an hour of driving on the tree-lined road where there was no clear destination and we hadn't seen any cars or houses for 20 minutes, Dave suddenly sat up straight in the passenger seat, tapping my shoulder with unusual excitement. He said, his voice full of enthusiasm, "Hey, look, there's a girl walking. We should stop and give her a ride." At that moment, I, with my chivalrous nature, thought there was no harm in stopping to see if she needed help, a naive thought on a deserted road where isolation could hide all dangers. I slowed the car down on the quiet road surrounded by thick woods, telling myself that we weren't in any real danger. As the car got closer, I saw the girl clearly. She looked young, but also had a mature, weathered look, perhaps in her early to mid-20s. Her hair was amber-colored, shimmering in the weak sunlight, and her outfit was strange, as if she was dressed for brunch or a fancy restaurant, not wandering in the woods. Here, there are regular customers with their own reputations. For example, one who always extends booking time, another who pays extra for private conversations. Dave rolled down the window and offered her a ride, and she turned towards us. At that moment, I saw a wooden and metal crucifix about 8 inches long, with the figure of Christ crucified dangling around her neck, a prominent religious symbol. In my head, I thought to myself, among all the people wandering in the woods, it's a religious person, and I couldn't help but smile at the irony, knowing that Dave's chances of socializing had probably decreased. She reacted by exclaiming in an excited voice, accompanied by a smile that was almost cute, but also a little scary, saying, "God bless you. I prayed to God to turn my tired feet into wheels, and He sent you, handsome young men, to save me. God is wonderful." Without hesitation, she opened the back door and sat right next to Ray, making Ray, who was already shy and awkward, even more flustered. I continued driving, adjusting the rearview mirror to observe her face, then asked where she wanted to go. She replied that she wanted us to take her home and would be very grateful if we came inside so she could prepare some food. I agreed, no problem, just point the way, although in reality I had no idea where I was. There was no GPS back then, and my flip phone had no signal. But then, as I was still looking through the mirror, her face suddenly changed, becoming darker and scarier, and she asked a question that sent a chill down my spine. "You guys are so foolish. Does any of you know where you are?" The question was strange and alarming, and my friends almost simultaneously replied no, while I initially intended to say yes, but then followed suit, not wanting to admit the truth. But then discomfort gradually arose during the conversation. He said strange things like, "Never been hugged before," and constantly declared he liked me a lot. We at the front desk often hear about their behavior distinguishing between normal things and real warnings. She said excitedly, "You must be very hungry. When we get home, you can come in and I'll make you some delicious food." My stomach clenched, making a noise, and even though I was hungry, I hesitated, only replying vaguely, "Yeah, we'll see." She gave me a look full of malice, then stared intently at me through the mirror, making me feel extremely uncomfortable. We continued driving for another 20 minutes on random roads through the endless woods. Finally, she shouted, "Okay, about 20 feet ahead is the entrance to my house. It's very hidden." She warned that the driveway was at least a quarter-mile long. When I turned onto the dirt road, the ancient trees grew so densely it was a perfect barrier for sunlight, making the place dark. I had to turn on the headlights to see clearly, and the air around seemed heavy, as if we were driving into the very heart of darkness. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become immortal entities creeping through every secluded road and threshold of strange houses, turning kind gestures into dangerous invitations, where curiosity can lead us into the heart of pure terror, and memories of mistakes merge with existing ghosts, making everything cold and ominous. As I told the story of the strange encounter with the mysterious girl and the road leading into the deep woods, now I will lead you through the next layers, where the hidden house becomes a stage for terrifying actions and false hospitality hides a rising darkness. These stories are not just narratives. They are whispers from the abyss, reminding us that sometimes kindness can be the first step leading to the abyss. The driveway to her house was indeed long, as if her warning wasn't a joke. A narrow, winding path through the woods, and when we finally arrived, I couldn't help but be surprised by the beautiful two-story house standing alone in the desolate woods like a lost gem in the darkness. When I stopped the car, the first thing I noticed was the strange silence that enveloped the place, an unnatural stillness, as if the entire forest was holding its breath. Serious warnings involved dangerous behavior like trying to bypass safety rules or acting aggressively without asking. I asked her, "Do you live alone? Are we bothering anyone?" She smiled and replied, "My mother isn't home. She went to early morning mass, but you guys can come in." Despite the warning thoughts in my head, the thought of food had overridden all worries. My stomach was rumbling louder than any reason. We followed her to the door, and immediately the house looked as if it hadn't been changed since the 70s, with a Brady Bunch-like style full of old furniture, dangling chandeliers, and an atmosphere like a movie filmed on an old soundstage. It created a sense of artificiality, as if we were stepping into a world that didn't belong to reality. She led us to the dining table outside the kitchen, where there were stools, and started preparing the meal. A family-sized tray of macaroni and cheese placed in the oven. She apologized for not preparing it beforehand, hoping it was enough for everyone, and said it would take about 30 to 45 minutes. For the next half hour, we tried to make small talk, but the atmosphere became strangely tense. It seemed I had annoyed her for some reason, as she kept glancing at me without saying a word. Her eyes fixed on me for 2 to 3 minutes straight without blinking, with a cold, expressionless face, an action that sent shivers down my spine as if she was looking through my soul. About 40 minutes passed, and she suddenly asked, "How old are you guys?" Then there's a particular customer known as the doctor. We replied, 19, 19, and 20. And then, in a creepy voice, she suggested, "Do you guys want to try some alcohol?" We, in our tired and thoughtless state, eagerly agreed. She walked to the refrigerator and took out a bottle of unlabeled alcohol, taking only 10 to 15 seconds, then poured each of us a glass. I didn't think much of her not drinking with us, assuming it was normal, but she kept pouring more whenever we finished, as if encouraging us to drink more. When the oven timer went off, she took out the hot macaroni and cheese tray, which looked quite appealing, and not bad at all. We started eating, but about halfway through the meal, I felt a sudden discomfort rising in my body, as if something was wrong. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just due to the alcohol lack of sleep in the early hour. Just then, from the corner of my eye, I saw a car pull into the driveway. It was her mother, the one she said was at Mass. He's wealthy, spends generously often, books long sessions with multiple people, and pays for simple things like luxurious lingerie or nurse roleplay. I realized the situation was getting awkward, not knowing how things would unfold. She got out of the car, looked directly at our car, and clearly realized there were uninvited guests at 8 a.m. I quickly chugged my second glass of alcohol, then said to her, "Hey, I think your mom is back. Can I have one more quick glass?" She smiled awkwardly but mysteriously replying, "Of course, go ahead and drink. Don't let it go to waste." But as soon as she finished pouring, her mother slammed the door open, looked at her daughter, and yelled, "Now what is going on in my house?" The girl tried to interject, "Mom, this isn't how you behave in front of new guests," but she swept her eyes fiercely over us. I tried to avoid her gaze by burying my face in my glass, but she threw her purse down, walked over, and snatched the glasses from our hands, throwing them into the sink. I was halfway through my drink when my glass was taken away and the air suddenly became suffocatingly tense. This story is still unfinished as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared because terror always finds a way to return. But there's a big warning sign associated with him which sent chills down my spine from the start. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities creeping through every threshold and whisper of hidden houses, turning friendly welcomes into dangerous traps, where suspicion can lead us into a spiral of pure terror, and memories of mistakes merge with rising ghosts, making everything cold and unstable. As I told the story of the sudden tension with the mother and the strange signs from the alcohol, now I will lead you through the next layers, where the truth is revealed through arguments and the escape becomes a fight for survival, where the line between kindness and threat blurs. These stories are not just narratives, they are warnings from the abyss reminding us that sometimes salvation can hide a dark plan. The glasses shattered in the sink, the sound echoing like a sudden curse, and the mother looked at her daughter with angry eyes, yelling in a panic, "What were you thinking? I told you never to give that to anyone." Her words contained a deep warning, as if the alcohol was not just a simple drink. The girl tried to justify herself weakly. "But Mom, our guests are thirsty." And the argument between the two escalated, their voices echoing through the old walls of the house. I, with innocent intentions, tried to interject to explain, hoping to defuse the situation. I said, my voice trembling, "I know it looks strange, but we just happened to give her a ride home. Then she invited us to eat and drink, and we were planning to leave right after." But the mother turned to me, her eyes sharp, and yelled, "I want you and your friends out of my house immediately." Her yelling became increasingly frantic, as if she was trying to push back an invisible threat. The first time he came, another receptionist warned me, no one has to be introduced to him if they don't want to warn the girls. They dragged each other into another room, continuing to argue, and I could hear fragments of words through the crack in the door. Phrases like, "We just got away from that and you gave that to them again. Are you crazy?" Making me realize that something more serious was going on, a dark secret we had accidentally gotten involved in. I whispered to my friends, "We have to go now," while trying to listen further. Dave and Ray looked at me, but they couldn't move easily. Ray said, his voice anxious, "I want to leave, but my legs won't move. It's like they're asleep." Dave added, "She definitely put something in the alcohol. My whole body is numb." I immediately realized that this wasn't ordinary alcohol. It must contain something that weakened us. I, being larger, only felt a slight numbness, like the feeling of limbs falling asleep when sitting for a long time. But it didn't go away, and I knew if we stayed, we would be completely immobilized. I focused all my strength to stand up with a powerful jump, and Dave followed suit. But Ray couldn't, so we quickly pulled him off the chair, grabbing his clothes at his thighs and carrying him out of the seat. I followed suit, calling out introductions and meeting room number 1 as per the usual procedure. That was the moment I realized the seriousness of the situation. It wasn't just about the alcohol, but something more sinister was happening, turning the story from an awkward situation into a truly terrifying scenario, like in the horror movies I used to tell. Suddenly, the argument stopped. Perhaps they heard our movements. The girl rushed downstairs, saw us trying to leave with Ray, and she yelled angrily, "Where do you think you're going?" She, whom I thought was a gentle girl with a crucifix, now looked like an embodiment of darkness. The child of God suddenly becoming demonic in my eyes. I tried to lie. We're just going outside for some air, maybe smoke a little. But she yelled loudly, "You can't leave. I haven't shown you the best part yet." Her cries echoed, "You can't leave. and she stood blocking the front door like a living wall. I thought to myself, a girl weighing less than 120 pounds thinks she can block someone like me weighing over 240 pounds. I said, my voice firm, ma'am, please move aside, we just want to leave. But she laughed strangely, not a joyful laugh, but a haunting laugh. Then said, you are so foolish. Once you're in, you'll never get out. This is God's plan. In there, the available girls would go and introduce themselves and have a pleasant chat. Those words ignited an indescribable surge of anger in me, a feeling of no way rising up as if the darkness was swallowing every last bit of hope. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities, creeping through every threshold and moment of facing madness, turning escapes into dangerous internal battles, where survival can lead us into the heart of deep terror and memories of ghosts merge with moments of recovery, making everything vague and uncertain. As I told the story of the fierce struggle with the mysterious girl and her terrifying confession, now I will lead you through the next layers, where my final strength is unleashed and the escape leads to a fragile moment of stillness where fire can dispel darkness but cannot erase the traces. These stories are not just narratives. They are whispers from the abyss, reminding us that sometimes survival is a journey full of darkness waiting to devour. I felt a final surge of energy welling up in my body as if everything slowed down in that moment. Before the girl could react, I gently lowered Ray to the floor as carefully as possible, then lunged towards her with a force I imagined from the movie The Waterboy, a charge full of determination pinning her against the front door. We fell to the ground and I yelled to Dave, "You get Ray to the car. I'll hold her off." But upon hearing it's the doctor, they all stood up, then most sat back down with only 2 remaining. I never wanted to hurt anyone, especially a woman, but at that moment, all limits were broken. My heart pounded. The toxic alcohol was spreading through my veins, and my body felt like it was about to collapse, but adrenaline was the miracle that kept me going. We rolled around on the living room floor. She screamed like a mad demon, trying to scratch my face with sharp fingernails. I tried to defend myself, making movements to stun her, then tried to get up to run to the car. But as soon as I moved, the mother yelled from behind, "Cassandra, let them go! Let them go!" However, the girl, now Cassandra, replied in a strange voice, "No, I want him now. The others can leave." I had managed to get up, but Cassandra lunged, trying to pull me back from the wide-open door, dragging me towards that weird, twisted Brady Bunch-style house. My body was numb from the poison, making resistance difficult, and I knew I had to do something immediately. My hand fumbled and grabbed something on a shelf, a heavy paperweight in a dark shape, looking like an antique. Then I hit her hard on the head, just enough to stun her. But it wasn't enough. She still tried to pull me. In a moment of desperation, I raised my hand high as if Thor was controlling my body and brought it down with a stronger blow. I immediately asked, "What's going on?" She suddenly stopped, and I saw an unexpected flow from her head, making her look at me with a stunned expression, her teeth and lips stained. She gasped, "This is God's will?" But I roared, "No, you're just crazy." And then she collapsed motionless. I rushed out of the house, ran down the outside stairs, stumbled to the car, helping Dave and Ray jump in. In just a few seconds, I drove the car out of the driveway, driving until I recognized the way back. That's when I could end the story here, but there's still an ending. After escaping that nightmare, we rushed to our safe haven, a familiar spot by the river where we often went to hide from the world. It was surrounded by dense bushes, feeling as safe as an invisible wall. We passed out in the car, perhaps from extreme exhaustion or the lingering effects of that alcohol, and woke up after at least 14 hours. A knock on the door startled me, my heart pounding, thinking it was the crazy girl who had found us. His phrase, "You should stay forever," echoed with strange wording that gave me goosebumps. They explained he likes certain stimulants and prefers companions who are into that, whether real or pretended. I lay in my own sweat, my body trembling, but when the door opened, it turned out to be Sean, our friend. He looked at us and said, "Hey, you guys look terrible." Sean had picked up our phone as usual and guessed we were here. He observed more closely and said, "I don't want to scare you, but come outside, I'll build a fire and prepare something to relax." After regaining our composure, we stumbled outside to the flickering bonfire. The warm light bringing me a little comfort, and smoking helped me relax a bit, as if the darkness was temporarily retreating. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities creeping through every whisper by the fire and buried memory, turning moments of sharing into dangerous revelations where truth can lead us into the heart of indelible terror and memories of ghosts merge with fragile hope, making everything vague and ominous. As I told the story of the dramatic escape and the comfort by the fire, now I will lead you through the next layers, where secrets are revealed and a new journey begins, where familiar places become lurking shadows. As a neurosurgeon, he has access to all sorts of strange substances, not pure stuff, but often mixed with anesthetics from the operating room. These stories are not just narratives. They are warnings from the abyss reminding us that sometimes the light of truth only highlights the darkness that awaits. After about 30 minutes of silence, where we just sat by the fire, letting our thoughts wander like ghosts, Sean finally broke the stillness. He looked at us with worried eyes and asked, "Hey guys, what the hell is going on? Why are you acting so strange?" Ray, his voice broken and almost crying, began to recount disjointedly. "We gave a girl a ride, then there was alcohol, something in the alcohol, and we couldn't move." Sean looked at him with a confused expression, asking again, "What are you talking about?" I, with a slightly sharp tone due to stress, quickly summarized, "We picked up a weird person, went to her house, had alcohol with something strange in it. Her mother came home, everything was chaotic, and we were lucky to escape." Sean looked at us with increasing worry, asking further, "So where was it?" We told him the location, and he started to fidget. He asked, "Her name is Cassandra, right?" I was surprised, asking back, "How did you know?" His behaviors involve using them in a dangerous way, making everyone cautious. Sean looked into the fire, swallowed hard, then began to share. He said he used to live nearby when he was little, just one driveway away, and at that time he was 8 years old and she was 15. She had scared him with harassing behavior, trying to manipulate him in inappropriate ways, and when her mother found out, she blamed him, even cruelly harming his pets. His family thought it was wild animals, but then his other pets were also seriously affected. By the time he was 12, she tried to approach him again in a threatening way, and he had to defend himself by using something of his father's to push her back. After that, his family moved away immediately. Sean concluded she is completely insane. I asked about the 8-inch crucifix she wore, and Sean stopped sighing. He said that when we saw her that morning, she was probably visiting her brother. I replied, "So what does that have to do with it?" With us at the front desk, he sometimes gets irritable if someone refuses after starting. He explained that her brother was in prison nearby, convicted for incidents involving poison and suspicious events at their house. Sean believed that her brother had taken the blame for his sister and was serving a life sentence. As for the crucifix, he said, "Because evil can hide in many different forms, as if it was just a facade hiding a dark truth." Sean's words still echo in my head to this day, even though I'm not religious, but it made everything clearer. I only hope that justice will find her and her mother so that those shadows can no longer harm anyone. But the story doesn't end there. My life has other chapters, other shadows waiting. My family always moved for work, and I grew up in Illinois, living on a farm with my grandparents. In my childhood, I stayed with them while my parents worked in other states. Then, in the summer between 8th and 9th grade, I stayed with my parents in Iowa for a while, and my mother drove me back to Illinois for the second half of the vacation because my biological father was coming to pick her up. The trip went smoothly until we entered Illinois and the sun set. When we checked the rooms, he's simply very creepy, trying to grab our hands or make us sit down. It was Friday the 13th, an ominous day. We passed a cemetery with a 10-foot-high chain-link fence, with a mesh covering overhead and a locked gate with a sign that read "Closed from dusk till dawn." Opposite was a campground named Rest in Peace, which made us joke about spooky things like vampires to dispel the strangeness. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities creeping through every dark road and hidden memory turning. Familiar journeys into dangerous warnings where suspicion can lead us into the heart of inevitable terror and memories of ghosts merge with new events, making everything vague and ominous. As I told the story of the secrets revealed by the fire and the ominous journey home, now I will lead you through the next layers, where signs of disappearance and strange objects open a new chapter and a peaceful night turns into the whisper of lurking darkness. These stories are not just narratives. They are whispers from the abyss, reminding us that sometimes normalcy is just a thin veil hiding fear. As we continued our journey, the second strange thing happened. The bright moon was suddenly obscured by thick black clouds, making the road even darker. I'm not conventionally beautiful, but he does this to every receptionist as if wanting to control. My mother decided to call a friend near home to report our location as a precaution. But as soon as she had said a few words, the phone signal completely disappeared, not a single bar left. We continued driving, and my mother mentioned as an interesting fact that we were near a high-security prison where there were signs warning, "Do not pick up hitchhikers to prevent escapes." The third thing made me even more confused. For 10 miles, I didn't see any signs like my mother mentioned. I pointed this out to her, and she replied, "Maybe we're not close enough yet. Keep looking." But as I observed more closely, I started seeing strange objects by the side of the road. First, a woman's high-heeled shoe, then a few miles later, a torn piece of clothing, and next a white jacket with dark stains in the ditch. I didn't say anything immediately because I was trying to understand what this was and why the signs had disappeared. It had been over 30 minutes since my mother mentioned them. Finally, we arrived home. I told my mother that I hadn't seen any signs and started telling her about the strange objects I saw by the side of the road. She gasped, then revealed that on her side, she also saw similar things: a high-heeled shoe, a piece of a bra, and perhaps a short skirt or a tight top. He grabs our hands, strokes our arms, and his gaze, an incredibly intense stare, like the eyes of a lifelike wax statue. Those objects were scattered randomly as if they were telling a story we didn't want to hear. We sat there exchanging speculations about what could have happened. The worst-case scenarios, like an incident related to the prison or something unexplainable. But finally we decided not to talk about it anymore because surely no one would believe us. Too many strange things on Friday the 13th, it sounded like a fictional story. I used to think that perhaps it was just a dream, but 2 years ago when I was 23, I brought it up with my mother. She remembered every detail, but still had no answers. It's still a mystery, like a shadow still lingering in memory. And then life led me to new chapters. Now I am 25 years old, a woman living in my mother's house with my fiancé and daughter. My parents often travel for long periods for work, so my family and I keep the house so it doesn't sit empty. The house is in the middle of a secluded farm, with the only neighbor being my grandmother, but she was at work when this happened. It's hard to describe, but it makes me feel seen through, yet not truly seen. My fiancé works the night shift, usually getting home between midnight and 1 a.m. That night, about 2 weeks ago, he called saying he was on his way, but would be a little late. About 10 minutes later, I heard the familiar sound of his car, the distinctive exhaust, pull into the driveway. The engine turned off. The car door closed, and my father's dog started barking frantically. Next, I heard the front door open and close, but he didn't come into the room right away. I thought it was okay because sometimes he stops by the bathroom or changes clothes first. But then I started wondering because I didn't hear the water running. And suddenly I heard the car sound again from a distance about half a mile away. The familiar car sound once again pulling into the driveway, the engine turned off, the door closed. This time the dog didn't bark at all. The front door opened and closed, and finally he walked into the room. The expression on his face is strange, his mouth smiling but his eyes remaining cold as if he's in another world. At that moment I realized something was wrong, as if he had arrived twice but only once for real. This story is still unfinished as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities, creeping through every threshold and moment of loneliness in the night, turning familiar sounds into dangerous whispers, where suspicion can lead us into the heart of unexplainable terror, and memories of ghosts merge with close losses, making everything vague and ominous. As I told the story of the strange events on the dark road and the unusual sounds in the house, now I will lead you through the next layers, where doubt turns into real fear, and a legacy from the past opens up secrets waiting to be discovered. These stories are not just narratives, they are whispers from the abyss, reminding us that sometimes what we consider safe is just a thin mask for darkness. I looked at my fiancé with a confused expression, unable to hide the panic rising within me. I asked him, "I thought you came home 10 minutes ago, then went somewhere else." He shook his head, his voice certain. "No, definitely not." "Why would you think that?" I recounted everything, the sound of the car, the door, and the strange silence afterward. Perhaps it's due to the substances he uses, but that doesn't make me less scared. He immediately panicked, stood up, and started searching the entire house, checking every dark corner. Afterward, he locked the 3 outside doors tightly as if building an invisible wall to protect us from what was lurking. From then on, we decided to make him a copy key, and I started locking the door every night to ensure safety. But last Thursday, we had to leave the door unlocked because my grandmother was planning to stop by to pick up my father's dog. We planned to leave for Pennsylvania that evening, and I lay down on the bed trying to get a little sleep. Suddenly, I heard the front door open and then slam shut. I immediately thought of my grandmother, so I just rolled over and continued resting, telling myself that everything was fine. But just 5 minutes later, my father's dog ran into the room and hid under the bed, a strange behavior that startled me. I immediately called my fiancé, telling him what had just happened. He replied that he was still in town about 15 minutes away from home. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just awkwardness and planned to gently decline. Every time I meet him, I feel nauseous, as if something dirty is clinging to my skin. I tried calling my grandmother, but no one answered. Then I texted my cousin, who might stop by early, but he said he was at home 45 minutes away. I texted my fiancé back explaining the situation, and the feeling of anxiety grew. About 10 minutes later, he and his uncle arrived, quickly searched the house and the surrounding area, but found nothing unusual. I was almost in tears sitting there with a vague fear, not knowing who had entered the house or how they left without a trace. Perhaps it was just someone opening and closing the door without coming in. But these events truly made me uneasy, especially since there have been other small strange things recently, insignificant individually, but now they seem to connect into a terrifying picture. And then life brought new chapters where sadness mingled with secrets from the past. Last week, my grandfather passed away in his sleep after a long battle with illness. Our relationship wasn't always good. When I was 16, I smoked and had long hair, which he wasn't happy about, while he had joined the US Navy and gone to the Pacific on an aircraft carrier at the same age. We didn't understand each other for many years, but recently, things had changed. However, a few experienced girls know how to handle him trying to get the maximum benefit while avoiding risks like pretending to use something. I had sorted out my life, and he became gentler in his old age. I started to be interested in military history, and we spent many hours together drinking beer and listening to him tell stories. By the time he passed away, we were talking every day, and that was a bright spot in my life. When I received the news from my cousin on a Saturday morning, I was heartbroken beyond measure. I just thanked him and hung up, sat on the sofa, and cried nonstop. The tears were not just for the loss, but also for the joy and gratitude. I was lucky to have that relationship, even if it was late. About 1 or 2 weeks after the funeral, my cousin called back and said they found an old trunk in his attic. Inside were Navy memorabilia, old photos, diaries, and souvenirs from the Pacific Theater in World War II. I immediately drove there, eager to explore, but when I arrived, the trunk was locked tightly by an old and rusty padlock, as if protecting a secret he wasn't ready to reveal. I didn't know about that trick before, and the reason they allow refusing introductions is because the risk is too great. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities, creeping through every old diary page and buried memory, turning family legacies into dangerous whispers, where curiosity can lead us into the heart of historical terror, and memories of ghosts merge with secrets, protected by time, making everything vague and ominous. As I told the story of the strange events in the house and the loss of my grandfather, now I will lead you through the next layers, where old objects reveal a dark past and faded writing becomes a bridge between the present and ancient fear. These stories are not just narratives. They are whispers from the abyss, reminding us that sometimes what we discover can awaken sleeping shadows. My cousin confessed that they didn't know exactly what was inside the trunk, but the US Navy emblem on it made it easy for us to guess. The only task at that moment was to open the lock, and I convinced a mechanic friend to drive over with bolt cutters. After opening it, we spent about an hour exploring my grandfather's belongings, photos, souvenirs, and items that reminded us of a bygone era. The photos of my grandfather in his teenage years made me exclaim, "Oh my God, these pictures," because he looked strangely like me, as if looking into an old sepia-toned mirror, a version of myself from another world. By the time my friend left, I felt a lump in my throat, regretting not being able to share this moment with him if we had had a little more time. I don't remember if he met anyone that day, but his shadow still lingered like a ghost waiting in a dark corner. That evening, as I was sipping his favorite rum to remember him, I discovered a small leather-bound diary hidden at the bottom of the trunk, and on it was an old paper ID card. The card was flimsy. The ink faded, issued during a time of extreme scarcity with a logo that included both English and Japanese text. The English text was clear, ABCC all caps. I was confused quickly, typed the phrase into Google to find out, wondering why my grandfather had never mentioned this organization. And then I understood why. ABCC stands for Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission. My grandfather was very young when World War II ended, and his favorite story was the moment he and the sailors heard the news of Japan's surrender over the radio. He said the joy was greater than any sports victory or good fortune, because they were about to go home. But the reality wasn't that simple. They didn't return immediately, but had to stay for years. I used to think he was just part of the regular occupation force, but now I realized he had participated in a uniquely terrible thing in the history of warfare. Time passed. The doctor still visited the brothel a few times during my time working there. The ABCC was established right after the war, by President Truman, with the sole purpose of observing, not treating the survivors. Their motto seemed to echo like a curse: observe and report. Do not attempt to alleviate suffering. Just observe and report. The thought sent shivers down my spine, as if a cold wind from the past was creeping into the present. I opened the diary and began to read. The first page, dated December 5, 1946, recorded when he was off the main coast of Japan about to depart for Hiroshima. He wrote about Captain Rubin's words: "It's going to be dirty work, not just counting bodies." He said the world had never seen such a weapon and no one knew exactly what had happened in Hiroshima. The sailors were excited to witness the damage, agreeing that the Japanese deserved what they got to pay for Pearl Harbor. My grandfather wrote home to his mother, and his parents were very proud of their son. We had strict rules. We didn't allow him to book appointments outside the premises to ensure safety. The writing gradually drifted to thoughts of home, and I flipped through the pages looking for further mentions of Hiroshima. I wondered why he had never told me about this. How could he forget such an experience? This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities, creeping through every yellowed page and memory buried by time, turning accounts from the past into dangerous whispers where curiosity can lead us into the heart of unexplainable terror, and memories of ghosts merge with dark legacies, making everything vague and ominous. As I told the story of the first diary entries revealing my grandfather's role in the war, now I will lead you through the next layers, where old pages become windows into deep fear, and what he witnessed is not just history, but living shadows. These stories are not just narratives. They are whispers from the abyss, reminding us that sometimes the truth can awaken sleeping nightmares. My grandfather was part of an event that shaped human history, where the birth of atomic warfare brought a new era of horror, turning ordinary people into witnesses of eternal darkness. Reading the diary entries, I realized that he was not just a sailor, but a part of the collective trauma that the world is still trying to forget. I turned to the next page, December 14, 1946, when he described stepping into the city of Hiroshima for the first time. There were other measures to reduce risk, but then a girl who often worked with him decided to travel far away. He wrote that none of them could believe that a single bomb could cause such terrible destruction. They were ordered to wear gas masks and thick rubber clothing, making them feel like grotesque shadows, not just because of their attire, but because of what their government had done, a moral burden weighing on their souls. The first thing he noticed was the silence, the most terrifying stillness he had ever experienced. After years of being accustomed to the noise of engines and gunfire, that silence made them confused and scared. He described it as no longer a city, but a dead city, like walking through a giant block of stone, a concrete body that had stopped breathing, where every sound seemed to be swallowed by an invisible darkness. Nowhere should be that quiet, he wrote, as if the soul of the place had been drained. But what haunted him the most were the shadows. The figures etched onto the broken brick walls, what was left of people deeply carved into memory like a curse. And then there was a moment he couldn't explain as he stared at a human figure on the wall. He swore it moved its head, slightly turned as if looking back at him. Just an image, but a presence as if it was watching him from the other side. After that, no one was willing to meet him anymore, and gradually he didn't come back because no one would be introduced. I stopped, drained my glass of rum to regain my composure, feeling the warmth spread like a thin protective layer. I told myself that these were just the hallucinations of a panicked young man, perhaps the result of fear and the horrific images he witnessed. Or perhaps they were manifestations of immense pain, the ghosts of suffering. Nevertheless, I couldn't stop reading, as if drawn by a strange pull. The next page, December 18th, 1946, he described going deeper into the heart of the disaster. He wrote, "Oh God help us, because everything was even worse than the last time. Countless traces of loss, where it was hard to distinguish what was left." He compared a ruined building to a patchwork quilt full of distorted shapes like a Picasso painting with twisted, charred lines, making it impossible to recognize human forms. He wondered, what have we done here? A question whose torment I could feel through every line. Then, when they stopped before a deep pit containing black, bubbling mud, steam rising, and heat penetrating their protective gear, they didn't dare get closer. The wind stopped blowing, bringing a terrifying stillness, and suddenly he heard it, a deep groan as if coming from the very ground. I thought everything was over, but then I moved to work at a new brothel closer to home with higher pay. A part of the mud rose, forming a loose structure, looking like a hand with fingers reaching up just for a moment before disappearing. One of his companions pointed, letting out a suppressed cry of horror, and then another shape emerged from the mud. A distinct human face with empty eye sockets and a mouth gaping as if screaming. When they returned, my grandfather asked his friend Bill if he had seen the same thing, as if seeking confirmation for the horror he didn't dare face alone. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities, creeping through every yellow diary page and whisper from the dead, turning historical memories into dangerous warnings, where curiosity can lead us into the heart of indelible terror, and memories of ghosts merge with buried secrets, making everything vague and ominous. As I told the story of the first diary entries revealing the devastation of Hiroshima, now I will lead you through the next layers, where faded writing turns into accounts of living shadows, and what my grandfather witnessed is not just the past, but the whisper of fear still lurking. These stories are not just narratives. They are whispers from the abyss, reminding us that sometimes the truth can pull us into eternal darkness. My grandfather asked his friend Bill if he had seen the face in the bubbling mud, but Bill just shook his head and said that anyone who thought they saw that needed their head examined. From then on, none of them mentioned it again, at least as far as I know about him. It was horrifying when he showed up there, as if the darkness was following me. He often mocked my love for horror stories, calling them silly stories for children and the naive, but he always added that there were much scarier things in real life. Now, reading the diary entries, I realized he was speaking from personal experience. The shadows he witnessed were not products of imagination, but what truly existed in the heart of destruction. It was late, and I had to work early the next morning, but I still poured another glass of rum and continued reading as if drawn by an irresistible force. The next page, December 18th, 1946, he described. December 1946, from Hiroshima, he wrote that it was their last patrol and they were all relieved to be leaving that place. He described that the deeper they went, the more horrifying everything became, to the point where 2 other sailors had to be sent for psychological evaluation after their most recent encounter. They silently agreed not to mention what they had seen, as there would surely be many others who needed help after that day. Then he told about another event an officer had to shoot down a pack of Japanese dogs that had gone wild due to the chaos in the city. They rushed out from the rubble howling and barking with limping steps. They used their guns to end their suffering without further thought. I ended the meeting quickly with a fake excuse, my heart starting to feel heavy. I immediately warned all the girls about him, and no one there wanted to interact. But my grandfather realized that those dogs were not like the others. A friend explained that it might be due to the effects of the invisible toxins from the bomb, which had damaged everything it touched. They told themselves it was just the effect on the dogs in Hiroshima, but upon closer observation, they began to doubt whether those things had ever been real dogs. The official reason was that the stray dogs were affected by toxins. But my grandfather and his comrades knew better. They were not what they once were. In the more terrifying details, he described that through the tangled black fur and festering wounds, they saw familiar things glinting, as if there were objects that didn't belong on animals. He emphasized dogs don't wear gold watches, dogs don't wear rings. Those words sent shivers down my spine, as if he was revealing a truth that went beyond the limits of reality. I told myself that it was all just the consequence of trauma, a young man suffering from PTSD and unable to comprehend the destruction around him. I don't blame him, because I would surely react the same way. Nevertheless, I couldn't stop reading, just kept turning the page. He tried to visit a few times, then gave up because no one would accept. December 19th, 1946, on the USS Cabo, my grandfather wrote about the story Bill told. It was Bill's first time in the Dead City, and it was raining heavily, the raindrops black with mud and oil. The raindrops collected on his goggles, blurring his vision. Bill said that other things were falling from the sky like strands of hair, fingernails, and pieces of clothing stuck to the equipment. He had never seen Bill cry, not even when they lost a friend to a kamikaze attack. But that day Bill cried as he talked about the kindergarten, where they found children lying in rows, each with a wound on their head, and they had changed in ways Bill couldn't describe or forget, like having extra eyes, missing eyes, or strange features on their bodies. Then the teacher, a charred figure, emerged from the rubble and begged them to end her suffering. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities, creeping through every cold grave and whisper from buried memories, turning family secrets into dangerous warnings, where curiosity can lead us into the heart of indelible terror, and memories of ghosts merge with new journeys, making everything vague and ominous. As I told the story of the diary entries revealing the devastation of Hiroshima, now I will lead you through the next layers, where tears become a bridge between past and present, and a new adventure unfolds where shadows lurk in the deep woods. A year later, I changed jobs because I couldn't do night shifts anymore, and in a conversation with an old friend from the brothel, I heard terrible news. Well, these stories are not just narratives. They are whispers from the abyss, reminding us that sometimes the truth can pull us into a fear with no escape. Bill cried as he recounted the moment the teacher knelt before him, pulling his gun barrel to her forehead, begging for an end to the unbearable pain. And then he told about how he pulled the trigger, an action that to this day still haunts me to this day. I couldn't bear it anymore, yelled enough, and slammed the diary shut, as if trying to lock those images into the bottom of the trunk, just as my grandfather had done to hide the truth. I put it away, hid it for myself, and from then until now, I haven't dared to look back. Those words were too heavy, making it impossible for me to continue reading without feeling like I was falling into an abyss. My grandfather spent the rest of his life trying to forget what he saw in the Dead City, while I was filling my mind with those very things, as if carrying a part of that pain. I tried to cry, tried to let everything out, but when I thought of Bill and the teacher, tears wouldn't flow. I felt I didn't deserve to cry compared to what they had gone through, the shadows they had to face alone. My friend asked, "Did you hear about the doctor?" That morning, I visited my grandfather's grave, planting a small stars and stripes flag in the ground as a gesture of respect. I was proud to call him my grandfather, and I believe that by the end of his life, he was also proud to call me his grandson. I felt relieved that he had found peace escaping the horrors that had once clung to him. Those shadows had come to him, but he never spoke of them, and now they couldn't touch him anymore. That hurt me because I couldn't contact him to share this burden. In a moment of distraction, I looked at the grave next to his, and the name carved on it froze me. Bill. I immediately understood why my grandfather chose this place to rest. They had fought side by side in the war, and now they would be together forever. An unbreakable bond between men who had faced unspeakable horror. Tears finally flowed like a final farewell. Rest in peace, Grandpa. And then the story leads me to a new chapter where the shadows spread beyond personal memory. I, the narrator, must give way to another voice, Dr. Benjamin Kelly, 31 years old, professor of primatology at the University of Manchester, Northern England. It turned out he was involved in an incident that led to a girl's death, and he was arrested. It was late last year when he set off for Africa for a research mission. The destination was the western wilderness of Kigoma in Tanzania, an area full of chimpanzee communities where he hoped to find discovery and knowledge. But instead, all they found was fear, horror, and death. Most of the research team lost their lives, leaving only 2 with deaths almost too horrific to recall. He wished he could forget the blind terror they experienced, but every day he tries to confront the ghastly things they heard and saw without success. Instead of forgetting, he decided to tell the story as a way to release the darkness that was holding his soul captive. The story takes place in Gombe National Park, a place only accessible by boat nestled between steep mountain ranges and Lake Tanganyika. That isolation had led to unique developments in plants and animals, and the research objective was their impact on the chimpanzee population. They loaded their gear onto a small fishing boat under the African dawn painting. The sky red, then sailed north for a few hours. The first time he saw Gombe, he saw an arc of towering mountains surrounding dense green forest. Police confirmed he had harmed her in his apartment, violating all safety rules. They landed, unloaded their gear onto the golden sand, and it felt like stepping into a scene from the movie Jurassic Park, Strange bird calls mingling with the gentle lapping of waves, and the forest seemed impenetrable. It was where they planned to stay for over a month, with an initial sense of adventure filling the air before the darkness truly descended. This story is still unfinished as the shadows still linger waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities creeping through every deep forest canopy and sound. Screeches in the distance, turning academic adventures into dangerous whispers where curiosity can lead us into the heart of unpredictable terror, and memories of ghosts merge with new realities, making everything vague and ominous. As I told the story of the secrets buried in my grandfather's diary and the transition to Dr. Benjamin Kelly's journey, now I will lead you through the next layers, where seemingly harmless encounters turn into signs of awakening darkness, and initial friendliness gives way to lurking fear. These stories are not just narratives. They are whispers from the abyss, reminding us that sometimes nature can hide nightmares waiting to rise. For some, this trip might have been the pinnacle of an academic career, an opportunity to make a mark in the world of research. Not long after arriving, we heard the chimpanzees before we saw them through the dense forest, high-pitched calls and deep hoots echoing from the canopy, creating a strange symphony. Authorities charged him with manslaughter, and he pleaded guilty to providing dangerous substances leading to the accident. Initially, we couldn't see them clearly, only saw them darting through the branches, leaving behind the rustling of leaves and branches like ghosts lurking in the shadows. After an hour of tiring wandering, suddenly they appeared right in front of us, a community of about 30 individuals playing, grooming each other, and munching on fruits and insects. Dr. Benjamin Kelly almost shed a tear when I was that close to them for the first time, a deeply emotional moment. The first close encounter was with a chimpanzee named Farida, as the guide called her. Farida was younger and more curious than the others. She approached me while I was eating lunch, sniffing the air and staring at my granola bar. She lightly tapped her hand on the ground, swaying back and forth, a gesture we understood as a request to share food. My heart felt a lump in my throat from excitement mixed with anxiety. I broke off a small piece and offered it, and that moment felt like a dream come true when Farida took it, making a soft hooting sound as if to say thank you. We started building a relationship, and they seemed to be slowly trusting us. However, the trip went smoothly, but not without obstacles. It was the hesitation of the alpha male, Akina, in accepting our presence. I couldn't help but think it was his fault, a person so terrible he couldn't be saved. Akina looked completely different from the others. His fur was almost steel gray instead of pure black. His body was large, bald, and had a white muzzle. The fur on his body was missing in large patches, revealing deep scars that testified to fierce leadership struggles. But what was truly striking were his eyes. While the eyes of other chimpanzees were usually light yellowish brown to dark earthy brown, Akina's eyes were almost brilliant orange, as if glowing from his sockets, making anyone who looked into them feel a strange power, as if he was looking through their soul. About a week after starting, things began to go wrong. A chimpanzee suddenly became seriously ill and died, and the guide suspected it was due to eating something poisonous or being bitten by an insect, but the cause remained unclear. What was more worrying was that Akina seemed to blame us. Gradually, the chimpanzees that were once friendly started to stay away, and a group of males began patrolling the area, moving back and forth to show hostility, as if warning us to keep our distance. Akina always watched from afar, his fiery eyes fixed on us, observing every movement, sending a clear message: we were no longer welcome. Then, early one morning, one of the park rangers rushed into our camp breathless and ordering us to follow him immediately. His voice was full of urgency, as if a dark storm was approaching, and we knew that the darkness we once thought was just an illusion was now. But there was also some responsibility on the management and the brothel owner, because they prioritized profit over everyone's safety. Become reality. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities creeping through every dense canopy and echoing screech from the deep woods, turning initial encounters into dangerous whispers, where curiosity can lead us into the heart of inescapable terror, and memories of ghosts merge with brutal realities, making everything vague and ominous. As I told the story of the first signs of hostility from Akina and the warning from Farida, now I will lead you through the next layers, where the pursuit becomes a living nightmare and violent actions reveal the darkness hidden deep within nature. These stories are not just narratives. They are whispers from the abyss, reminding us that sometimes life can hide unimaginable pain. We rushed through the bushes, heading towards the chimpanzee's cries, where everything was exploding with an intensity that made my ears ache and my scalp prickle. Akina was circling a smaller chimpanzee, his fiery eyes and sharp fangs glinting under the sunlight filtering through the canopy. In the smaller chimpanzee's hand, I recognized the piece of granola bar I had given it the night before. A small connection that now became the spark for rage. We stood there silent and horrified, unable to intervene as Akina lunged, gripping the other chimpanzee's head with his large hands. They sent the girls, especially the new ones, to meet him without adequate warning and allowed off-site appointments. The small animal struggled in vain. Akina's muscles bulged, and then a gruesome cracking sound echoed as if the air itself was shattering, leaving traces of destruction we didn't dare look at closely. The chimpanzee's cries became increasingly violent, as if the entire community was losing control. Some showed clear signs of pain, tearing at their hair and clutching their heads in despair, while others seemed to cheer Akina on, wrapping their arms around him as a gesture of surrender and reverence. Akina brushed off that attention, turning his anger towards the small piece of food, punching it hard as if venting his contempt for us, the outsiders who had invaded their territory. Suddenly, Farida darted through the bushes towards me, its eyes wide with fear and pain, an expression that needed no words to translate. Both Farida and I gasped a shared gesture of horror, and in that look I felt the silent plea, "Run, run for your life." But then the whole troop noticed our presence, hidden in the foliage, and everything turned towards us. The young males loyal to Akina began to confront us, hooting and pounding the ground, displaying a primal aggression that still makes me tremble when I remember it. I looked into Farida's eyes, where that yellowish-brown fear repeated the warning, "Run, run fast." And we ran, relentlessly pursued by Akina's followers. Afterward, Asher kept texting non-stop, expressing his feelings intensely. Later, I learned the medical board had known about his addiction for years, even helping cover up some failed surgeries. The chimpanzees were much faster than us, with the agility that we, clumsy, scared humans, strangers to this place, couldn't match. We had no chance, just lost shadows in the green forest. In the escape, our group was reduced to about 3 people besides me, while the original team had 10. One person in the group, a researcher from Boston with a heavy build, was someone whose desperate cry I will never forget. The chimpanzees descended, one lunging from above onto him with precise and violent force, sending him tumbling onto the leaf-covered ground. 2 others quickly joined in, and what happened next was not hunting for survival. They didn't kill quickly, but seemed to want to punish, as if demanding justice for what we considered wrong. Those actions with brutal force left wounds not only on the body, but also on the soul, as if they were breaking every barrier of mercy. I didn't see the details, but from his cry of pain, I knew that the horror had gone beyond the limits of endurance, a reminder that in the darkness of nature, revenge can take the form of creatures we once thought were harmless. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. That news sent shivers down my spine, as if the nightmare would never end. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities, creeping through every dense canopy, and blood-curdling screech from the deep woods, turning peaceful moments into dangerous whispers, where curiosity can lead us into the heart of inescapable terror, and memories of ghosts merge with survival, struggles making everything vague and ominous. As I told the story of the brutal pursuit and the violent actions of the chimpanzees, now I will lead you through the next layers, where the escape turns into a direct confrontation with darkness, and unexpected intervention brings a fragile ray of hope amidst the abyss. These stories are not just narratives. They are whispers from the abyss, reminding us that sometimes loyalty can be a double-edged sword between life and death. Amidst the desperate cries, a chimpanzee grabbed my colleague's jaw, and in that moment everything seemed to shatter. A brutal act that made bones grind and ligaments tear, turning his screams into choked sounds no longer human. The cries gradually faded, as if he was drowning in unspeakable pain. And before we continued running, I managed to see another chimpanzee tearing at his clothes, performing brutal acts of punishment, as if invading the very core of life. I told myself that they weren't just attacking, they were consuming what was left, a behavior I didn't dare think about further. We rushed through the camp, abandoning expensive equipment without hesitation, focusing only on running towards the beach, where the boat was our only hope for survival. We burst through the trees, dashed onto the golden sand, our hearts pounding with rising fear. But as we approached the boat, a dark figure was already there. and at first I thought it was someone from our team who had heard the noise and decided to leave. My friend and I spent time sharing stories about him, but gradually I tried to forget. For a brief moment I felt grateful, as if God was giving us a chance. However, when that dark figure stood up and turned around, terror surged again. It was Akina. His gray muzzle was stained crimson, indicating he had just been in a slaughter, and on the deck of the boat, a Tanzanian man lay there broken and showing no signs of life. Akina's eyes glowed with brutal delight. When he saw us, he threw away a piece of dark brown flesh he was gnawing on, then let out a triumphant hoot, as if tasting the flavor of power and fear from us. In that moment, I felt a strange clarity, as if everything became simple and understandable. Akina to me was the embodiment of both divinity and devil. He had crowned himself king through blood and pain, and that power had driven him mad. It was all too human to be terrifying. A mini war between animals and humans where power blinded. I stood there sweating profusely and gasping for breath. My feet felt glued to the sand, waiting for the impending death. Akina jumped down from the boat, lunging towards me with terrifying force, making me clearly feel the weakness of my body, a frail, hairless creature no match for his agility and strength. Recently, in a conversation with an old friend, his name came up again, making me search on Google. I knew I couldn't do anything, could only stand there and accept my fate. But then everything changed in the blink of an eye. From the corner of my eye, I saw a black streak flash by. Another chimpanzee lunged at Akina, knocking him away. I was stunned because I had accepted death to the point of being unable to move. In front of me, a young chimpanzee was confronting the alpha, screaming and baring its teeth fiercely. It was Farida, the gentle creature we had known, now a challenger. Farida quickly glanced at me, those eyes giving me the look I had seen before, as if saying, "Run, human creature, run if you want to live." Akina pounded the sand in primal rage, unable to accept this defiance, but we didn't wait. My surviving colleague jumped onto the boat and started the engine while I tried to push the boat out into the lake. Behind us, the sound of fighting echoed, Akina's roar almost drowning out Farida's high-pitched cries, a battle for survival that I couldn't stay to witness. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I found out he had been released from prison, and I hope he's no longer practicing medicine. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities, creeping through every ripple of the lake and echoing cry from the distant shore, turning moments of escape into dangerous whispers where curiosity can lead us into the heart of indelible terror, and memories of ghosts merge with bloody lessons, making everything vague and ominous. As I told the story of Farida's brave intervention and the escape from Gombe, now I will lead you through the next layers, where the rescue brings regret and deep reflection, turning the story into a warning about human nature. These stories are not just narratives. They are whispers from the abyss, reminding us that sometimes life is the greatest darkness we have to face. When the boat finally escaped the sand, my eyes were blurred with tears, a mixture of relief and unspeakable pain. We drifted freely on the lake, and I tried to pull myself onto the deck, rolling onto the boat floor with trembling hands, kneeling to catch my breath. Before we left completely, I turned back to look at the shore of Gombe one last time, where the dense trees now seemed to be a curtain hiding dark secrets. Akina was standing there beside the broken figure of Farida, who had once been a symbol of curiosity and kindness. Her chest was still rising and falling, showing she was alive but clearly defeated. Farida turned her head towards us, and I swear we had a moment of eye contact, a final connection, full of sacrifice and understanding. The thought that he could be anywhere waiting keeps me up at night. I whispered, "Thank you," but the words were drowned out by the roar of the boat engine, as if nature itself was stealing my gratitude. Then Akina dealt a final blow with terrible force, and I couldn't bear to look anymore. I turned away, leaving a deep regret in my heart. In the following months, I was granted a 3-month leave from the university, a period to try to heal the invisible wounds. Every time I saw a chimpanzee, even just through an image or in a zoo, I felt a chill run down my spine, as if that fear was clinging to me. I had to politely excuse myself, unable to face the memory without feeling like I was reliving the nightmare. If it weren't for Farida, I probably would never be able to look at them without trembling. She saved not only my life, but also a part of my soul. The trip to Tanzania was a tragic failure with so many lives lost, but it was not in vain. From it, I learned that human beings always try to separate themselves from the natural world, considering themselves superior to animals. However, the harder we try, the clearer it becomes that we are still just animals with brutal instincts hidden deep within. Then last December, another incident happened, making me feel extremely uneasy. suspicion, jealousy, tribalism, and war. These things not only exist in humans, but are also reflected in the behavior of the chimpanzees in Kigoma. We were once them, and perhaps in the future we may return to that nature where the darkness of savagery rises again. And now, as the narrator, I must say goodbye. Hello, friends! This is Mr. X Dreams. Thank you, Let's Read, for inviting me to share this story. If you want to explore more, please visit the Dreamers channel or my website. Until next time, friends, take care of yourselves. This story is still unfinished as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared because terror always finds a way to return. At that time, I was living nomadically with my girlfriend, a difficult situation that led us to buy an old RV to live in. But the outdated RV with pets made finding parking difficult, so we parked in the furthest corner of the Walmart parking lot in Bend, Oregon. It was around 10 a.m. my girlfriend went to work by bus, leaving me to watch over the RV and the dogs. I tried to gently refuse, saying I didn't want any relationship right now. It was an awkward lie, as I hated direct confrontation. I thought it would be a long day of waiting, so I went into the Walmart store twice to shop, then came back to fix the RV and paint to kill time. When I got bored, I decided to take a short nap. Suddenly, 2 police cars parked right next to the RV while I was taking the dogs out, making me worried, thinking they would ask us to move because we parked overnight. They just sat there for a while doing nothing, and I gradually fell asleep despite their presence. When I woke up, it was still light, feeling safe with the police nearby, and I always carried pepper spray with me. However, a vague sense of unease began to creep in as if darkness was gathering around the RV. My girlfriend hadn't returned yet, expected to be late, and since she had the only phone, I felt completely isolated. I decided to go into Walmart to check the time, each step echoing on the hard ground. Outside the door, the parking lot now looked deserted. The police cars had left, only a truck was parked right behind our RV. That truck stood out in the empty space, making me wonder who could be in there. Then he sent a long, extremely creepy paragraph. He accepted that I didn't want a relationship now, but he would wait for me and keep himself pure just for me. I walked into the store, went straight to the restroom in the front, then wandered to the electronics section to look at the time on the display screen. The clock showed it was just a few minutes before 6 p.m. time seemed to drag in the heavy air. I left the store after only a few minutes, a vague sense of unease starting to rise in my heart. Outside the door, the crowd was thinning out and I saw a man walking in the same direction, tall and thin with shoulder-length blonde hair, wearing a black hoodie. I walked about 30 feet behind him, realizing he was heading straight towards the RV as if that truck belonged to him. He walked quickly without hesitation, making me feel like he had a clear objective. As we passed the crowded area, I secretly took the pepper spray out of my pocket, holding it tight in my hand. A safety habit I always do. He walked between the RV and the truck door, but instead of getting in, he stood tall, looking around as if waiting. I stopped, not daring to get closer, then turned towards the more crowded parking area of the store next door, my heart pounding. He turned back to look at me. Our eyes met for a long moment as if he recognized me from somewhere. That message was one of the scariest things I had ever received, making my heart pound in the darkness of my dorm room. That feeling was like he had been watching me for a long time, and now suddenly saw me, giving me goosebumps. I kept walking, my eyes still fixed on him while he watched, then he snuck around the RV towards the bushes and a dead-end fence. I ran into the other store, trying to get out of his sight, my mind racing to figure out how to react. Inside, people were crowded, but no one paid attention. The service counter was empty, so I went straight to the gas station next door to borrow a phone. I called my girlfriend quickly, told her about the situation, told her not to come directly to the RV, my voice trembling with fear. After that, I went back to Walmart, bought a coffee at the McDonald's inside, sat and waited for another hour, my eyes constantly scanning around. I thought about calling the police, worried about the dogs and belongings being stolen, but then remembered the last time it took them 2 hours to arrive and the violent situation at the mall. I was afraid they would bother us about the parking spot, and since I didn't have a driver's license, I couldn't move the RV myself without danger. When my girlfriend returned, we went to the RV together. The truck was gone, nothing inside was touched, but the windows weren't locked properly. The dogs were panicked, trembling in the corner, as if they sensed something bad. Even though I tried to cool things down, Asher wouldn't let go, appearing everywhere on campus by chance. I think he probably gave up on the idea of stealing after being spotted, but his eyes made me believe he didn't just want belongings. Now life has changed. I am an American living in France, working in the kitchen of a 5-star hotel. But the unease still follows me like a lurking shadow, waiting for a chance to emerge. After a terrible shift at the 5-star hotel in France, I drove for 30 minutes, then took the subway for another 30 minutes, ending with a tiring 10-minute walk. Working from 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. every day exhausted me, and my boss was an idiot. The customers were arrogant, treating employees like trash. That job was truly awful, making me want to run away every time my shift ended. That day, after a particularly bad shift, my hair was greasy, my face numb from having to fake smiles at rude people. I just wanted to go home, shower, and sleep deeply, forgetting everything. I put on my headphones, stood waiting for the subway at the crowded station, the music playing like a small shield. This station's train opens on both sides, unlike other stations that only open on one side to exit, so I got on and stopped by the door that didn't open anymore, leaning against it to rest. That year, I was only 17, starting my freshman year at the local university in my hometown, a fairly friendly school with not too many students, enough for me to feel anonymous in the crowd. He was always nearby when my class ended, or in the dining hall at the same time, even though I never changed my schedule. Suddenly, a man in an electric wheelchair rolled in, stopping right in front of the door I was standing by. He had bags hanging on the back of his chair, and when the door closed, the bags got stuck, so I quickly pulled them out to avoid them getting caught, a natural action without thinking. He smiled at me, but the smile made me a bit uneasy. He started talking, but I couldn't hear clearly because of my headphones, and I was too tired to care. Being kind, I took off my headphones to talk, even though his voice was hard to hear due to his disability. My French isn't good, so I said, "Sorry, I don't speak French well." He switched to English, and we had a few normal sentences asking about where I was from, why I was here, and for how long. But then the conversation shifted. "You are so beautiful. Are you getting off at Station X?" I felt a bit strange replying, "No, I'm getting off at Station W, one station before that." He invited, "Get off at Station X with me, you can come to my place." I tried to dismiss those coincidences, thinking they were just random. A mistake I later regretted. I politely refused, but he said, "Kiss me." Those words stunned me, my heart pounded, and I thought, forget it, no way. I shook my head, put my headphones back on, trying to ignore him. But he didn't stop, kept talking, even though I ignored him, then honked his wheelchair horn, loudly attracting everyone's attention on the train. Everyone looked at me as if I were the bad guy, making me feel obligated to take off my headphones again. He kept asking, "Do you have a boyfriend? Do you want to be my girlfriend? Kiss me." I was around 20, and he looked over 50. The age difference made everything even scarier. My station arrived. I quickly said goodbye and got off, but he rolled after me off the train. I said, "This isn't your station." He replied, "I'm going home with you." Finally, because I was so scared, I decided to refuse completely, stating clearly that I didn't want to be involved anymore. Those words sent a chill down my spine. I thought I could easily get away from someone with a disability, so I walked quickly towards the stairs. The building had 2 floors. I went up the stairs, quickly falling a few times because I was rushing, hoping he wouldn't keep up. Outside, I thought I was safe, but then the buzzing sound of the wheelchair echoed behind me. He was coming faster than I thought. I started running for real, absolutely terrified, feeling like he wouldn't let me go. Every step echoed in the night, and that fear still haunts me to this day. I ran to the car, my hands trembling with fear. The key kept slipping from the lock. Every second felt like an eternity, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, I opened the door, jumped into the driver's seat, and backed up immediately. Through the rearview mirror, I saw him there, his wheelchair parked right behind the buzzing sound echoing. I didn't know what to do. A crazy thought ran through my head like hitting him, but I couldn't. I just wanted to get home safely. Asher didn't accept it, starting to use manipulative tactics, talking about self-harm and how no one loved him. We were in a standoff like that for about 10 minutes. He blocked the way, his eyes flashing with hostility. Then he rolled away, still staring at me as he left, giving me goosebumps. I stepped on the gas, speeding away, a mix of relief and trembling, thinking the nightmare was over. The next morning, I drove to work, my eyes stinging from lack of sleep but trying to focus. When I got off at the subway station, I saw him waiting on the platform, a twisted smile on his face. I suddenly remembered yesterday I had accidentally mentioned my work schedule, and he had remembered everything. He rolled towards me, so I turned around and ran back up the stairs, my feet moving quickly. While running, I called my boss, saying I would be late, my voice lost in panic. Instead of taking the train, I drove into the city, even though I knew it would cost gas and parking money. Since then, I haven't seen him, but I changed subway stations to avoid risk, even though other places also looked suspicious. I immediately recognized that as manipulation based on experience from my dramatic past relationship. Now, every time I see a wheelchair, I panic as if the old darkness is returning. Going back in time, I grew up in Baltimore City until I was 12. and the scary incident happened when I was about 7 or 8, definitely before age 9. At that time, my brother was still at home, hadn't joined the military yet, while my mother worked as a nurse with 12-hour shifts. Both my brother and mother were involved with the military, so my home always had a disciplined atmosphere. I was born with a vocal cord disability, which made me unable to speak, and that affects this story. My mother was worried because I couldn't call for help, afraid I would become an easy target for bad people. My house was only 6 blocks from school, so sometimes I walked home alone, although my brother would pick me up if he could. He was busy with soccer or baseball, so he wasn't always available, and my mother worked long shifts. At first, my mother didn't want me to walk, but I kept begging, feeling grown up when I did it myself. I could take the bus, but I preferred walking, although now that I think about it, I was so foolish and naive. I immediately shut it down, declaring we couldn't be friends. My mother always taught me about danger from strangers, making me wear a neck whistle and learn self-defense from age 4. However, at age 7 or 8, I hadn't really mastered those skills. That day, I walked home alone like a lonely child with no friends, not to complain, but so you understand the situation. The sky was gray, and the familiar street suddenly became scarier than ever. I usually paid attention to my surroundings when walking home, but like any other child, my mind often wandered thinking about trivial things like games or dinner. That day, when I was halfway home, I was passing a narrow, dark and damp alley where sunlight rarely reached. Suddenly, a rough, strong hand grabbed me from behind, pulling me back, giving me no time to react. My body froze, as if frozen in that moment. My heart pounded, but my brain didn't send commands for my muscles to move. That detail is still vivid in my memory. The horrible stench from the attacker, like old sweat and dirty socks, went straight up my nose. Hot, disgusting breath puffed onto my neck and the back of my head like the panting of an animal in the scorching heat. After saying that, I thought everything was over, but his delayed response threw everything into chaos. He didn't say a word. That silence made the atmosphere even more terrifying, as if he knew exactly what he was doing. His arm wrapped tightly around me, squeezing like a vice, and later I thought maybe he had been watching me before, knowing I couldn't scream because of my disability. He didn't even try to cover my mouth, which only reinforced the thought that he had planned everything. Time seemed to slow down just a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity, like a nightmare that wouldn't end. At first, I couldn't move. My body felt locked up, and I saw the familiar sidewalk receding as he pulled me deeper into the alley. Then suddenly, my body woke up. I started struggling, flailing my arms and legs, trying to break free. His grip was so tight I thought it could break bones. I don't know if it was due to real strength or his age and experience. I tried to reach for the whistle around my neck, but my arm was pinned, unable to move. I kicked my legs with all my might, kicking at the air, kicking at him, but it had no effect. A feeling of helplessness enveloped me like a dark fog. The thought flashed. This is exactly what my mother and teachers warned about, the bad people lurking. And now that fear had become reality, making me more terrified than ever. Luckily, at that time, I was out of town for a performance hundreds of miles away. I tried to kick my heels backward, aiming at him, but failed completely, and he squeezed tighter, almost cutting off my breath. Everything started to blur. My head spun. I felt dizzy, and the fear peaked as I felt weakness spreading. If everything went dark, would I ever wake up? My head started to droop, my body weakening as if sinking into an abyss. Then suddenly I heard shouting from the street, echoing into the alley. I tried to lift my head, my blurry eyes seeing 2 figures running towards us, shouting loudly. He let go of me immediately, as if startled by the sudden appearance, and I fell onto the concrete, gasping for breath, my body trembling uncontrollably. The backpack on my back felt heavy, as if filled with rocks, while I was still trying to breathe. The sound of the 2 rescuers' running feet echoed. One person rushed past me, chasing the attacker who was running away towards the other side of the alley. The other person stopped beside me. I felt their hand gently touch my shoulder, their voice asking, "Are you okay?" That question pulled me out of my daze, and I immediately got up without looking back, rushing towards my house. Even so, the feeling of unease haunted me, as if some eyes were watching from afar. I ran like crazy along the alley, then onto the main road, not stopping until I touched the door of my house. Inside the house, I locked the door tightly, then collapsed onto the floor, curling up into a small ball. Fear surged, tears streamed down. I sobbed, the sobs silent because I couldn't make any sound. I lay there. It felt like forever until my brother came home from practice, opened the door, and saw me in that state. The darkness of that event still clinging to me to this day. When my brother came home from practice, he saw me curled up on the floor, my face dirty and tears still lingering. It was clear I was very confused and scared. He immediately asked what had happened, his voice full of worry, but I was too shocked to explain clearly. All the words in my head seemed jumbled. I could only gesture and shake my head in despair. Nevertheless, he understood somewhat and immediately called the police and then called Mom, his voice ringing with determination, as if he wanted to protect me from the outside world. When my brother came home from practice, he saw me curled up on the floor, my face dirty and tears still lingering. It was clear I was very confused and scared. He immediately asked what had happened, his voice full of worry, but I was too shocked to explain clearly. All the words in my head seemed jumbled. I could only gesture and shake my head in despair. Nevertheless, he understood somewhat and immediately called the police and then called Mom, his voice ringing with determination as if he wanted to protect me from the outside world. To this day, I still don't know if that was the real end, and that fear still lingers in my mind. He wanted to rush out and find the attacker for revenge, but instead, he sat down beside me, held me in his arms like when I was little, and we sat on the steps waiting for the police to arrive. The police arrived quite quickly, which was surprising because this area was usually slow to respond, and my mother arrived right after, her face pale with worry and anger like a storm about to erupt. My brother and mother helped me recount the incident to the police, as I could only communicate through American Sign Language ASL. They translated every detail, but I couldn't describe the attacker's face because I never saw him. He was behind me the whole time. The police took notes and said they would keep an eye out for suspicious individuals, but they also admitted the chances of finding him were very low because the alley was dark and had no cameras. Later, we learned that the two people who saved me had also called the police, and they provided a vague description. He was wearing a beanie with a hood, so unless he wore that outfit again, identification would be very difficult. I felt clearly that the police didn't take this too seriously, perhaps because Baltimore at that time was full of strange crimes, and my case was just one of dozens. They just gave general advice. Be more careful from now on, then left, leaving us with the fear still intact. My mother and brother kept calling the police for several weeks afterward, but there was no progress, and the attacker remained at large like a ghost who was never caught. From then on, everything changed. Mom no longer allowed me to walk home alone, and I started taking the bus being dropped off right in front of the house for more safety. I lived in the dorms on campus trying to adapt to a new life after a breakup. After blocking contact with Asher, I thought everything would be over, but the nightmare had only just begun. My brother arranged with his coach to come home earlier, waiting for me every day, like a solid protective wall. A few years later, when I was 12, our family moved to Washington State, partly to start over, and I only returned to Baltimore occasionally to visit my grandparents, but never went near the old neighborhood again. That place is now a scar in my memory. Looking back, I am forever grateful to those two men who ran into that alley without hesitation. Without them, I dare not think of the terrible outcome that could have happened. They were true heroes, and that gratitude still burns within me like a small flame in the darkness. Then life went on, and a few years later, I experienced another event, this time on a cruise ship during Thanksgiving with my entire family. I stayed in my grandparents' cabin to get away from my brothers, finding a bit of private space amidst the vast ocean. On the first day, we wandered around the ship meeting people, and I made friends with those who liked basketball, like me arranging a quick game at night. The challenge was that the basketball court closed at 7 p.m., so we had to sneak in, making it a daily habit, a little fun adventure during the trip. On the last night on the ship, we played a game as usual, but then I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. He sent a series of abusive paragraphs calling me disgusting names, saying I needed to be taught a lesson. I stopped playing, took it out, and read a message from an unknown number. Go check on your grandparents. That message made me stop thinking. I quickly said goodbye to my friends and went straight back to my cabin area. The path was long. I had to walk through the hallway and wait for the elevator, then continue towards the other side of the ship where my grandparents' cabin was located. On the way, I saw a tattooed man staring at me from the left. His gaze sent chills down my spine. Being a suspicious person, I told myself it might just be my imagination, but then a strange feeling arose, as if something was about to happen and I couldn't ignore it. I continued walking down the hallway, trying to ignore the rising sense of anxiety, but then the tattooed man appeared, walking past me with a sudden question. "Excuse me, have you seen a gentleman come out of this room?" His voice sounded normal, even polite, so I shook my head and replied, "No." I thought the conversation was over and continued walking, hoping he wouldn't bother me anymore. But when I glanced back, he was walking in my direction, his footsteps echoing on the ship's floor. I deliberately slowed down to see if he would pass, then blurted out as a distraction, "How stupid my room is on the other side." He looked a bit angry. His face fell as he retorted, "You're lying. He's up ahead. Let me take you to your grandparents." At first, I tried to endure it, just skimming and ignoring, telling myself it was just a temporary outburst of anger. Those words sent a chill down my spine. My face turned pale as I realized he knew too much. I knew clearly how bad things would get if I followed him, so I turned around and ran, my heart pounding. I glanced back to see if he was chasing me. At first, he wasn't, so I stopped thinking I was safe. But then loud footsteps echoed behind me, and when I turned my head, he was rushing towards me. I kept running, but he was faster, grabbed my arm, and pulled me back. I couldn't scream. Fear choked my throat, and I hoped someone from the rooms would come out. But it was the middle of the night, everything was silent. He pulled me into an empty room. There was no furniture. Only a woman sitting in the dark corner. She looked heavy, and as he pushed me in, he said, "Until her shift ends, I'll rest." She nodded, and I was still in shock. My limbs felt heavy. She grabbed me, saying something that sent chills down my spine. "I'm getting married soon, so this is my last fun time." I realized I was just a child at that time, and fear surged. But then a sudden wave of nausea hit me, perhaps from stress and the food from the party. I threw up right there. That made her let go, and I took the opportunity to rush out of the room, running at full speed to my grandparents' cabin. Once inside, I locked the door tightly, double-locked it to be sure. My grandparents woke up asking if something was wrong, but I didn't want to worry them further. In my head, I wanted to tell them everything, but instead, I made up a story. Security saw my friends playing basketball and chased us, so we ran. They believed me and went back to sleep while I stayed in the bathroom all night. Not because of nausea, but because of extreme fear. He must have been watching me and known our room number. I stayed awake all night, my eyes fixed on the door, but nothing else happened. The next morning, the family went to eat breakfast in the main dining room. As we were led to a table, I scanned the room and saw him, with the woman and a few other tough-looking people. They stared at me, their eyes piercing, making me freeze on the spot. But then Asher changed, as if regretting it, and started apologizing nonstop, talking about his loneliness, saying I was his only friend and how much he loved me. Oh, my mother saw it, then looked towards their table, calmly saying, "Looks like that tattooed guy proposed to the girl a few nights ago." I blurted out, "Oh my God," but Mom lightly hit my hand, saying, "Watch your mouth and sit down." I sat down, turning my back to them, trying to pretend to be calm, but the fear still lingered. I never told my family about that incident, afraid they wouldn't let me travel anymore. Instead, I texted my friends from the basketball court, telling them everything. The only people who knew the truth, and they became my support in the darkness of my memories. I texted my new friends from the basketball court, telling them everything about the incident on the ship, and one of them replied, "That guy chased me too, but luckily I ran away before he could catch me." That confession gave me some relief, knowing I wasn't the only victim, but it also sent shivers down my spine, thinking that he was a real predator lurking on that ship. I decided not to tell anyone else besides that group of friends, because I didn't want to worry my family further, and I was still confused as to how he got my phone number. Maybe he had been watching me before. Then life went on, and I started a relationship that I thought was perfect. He was the ideal man. We traveled everywhere, explored new places, and everyone around us said we were a radiant couple, so in love we couldn't be separated. We built dreams together, and everything seemed too good to be true. After 3 years, he decided to move to the downtown area to be closer to work, and he asked for my opinion. We went to look at apartments together. After looking at terrible places, we found a dream place, and it was there that he got down on one knee and proposed to me. Those words sent chills down my spine, because I knew it was just a tactic to pull me back in. I accepted, so happy I felt like I was floating, and we moved in immediately. The next 6 months were the best time of my life. We planned a perfect wedding, and when I lost my job, I became a housewife, having time to take care of the house. He always thanked me every morning for breakfast and clean clothes, and we dreamed of children, of trips together. The future seemed bright. But then one night he came home from work like a completely different person. He didn't touch me, didn't look me in the eye, and suddenly said, "This isn't what I want for myself. Give the ring back and leave." I was stunned, didn't understand anything, begged him to explain, but he just pushed me out the door, saying a taxi was waiting downstairs. I only managed to grab my coat purse and a little money tears streaming down, but he didn't care. I had nowhere to go, but he didn't notice, just slammed the door shut. I ended up at my mother's house crying hysterically, feeling like my world had collapsed. He refused all my calls, and all my belongings were still at the apartment. I had to borrow clothes, accept hand-me-downs, and never got them back. The wedding was also canceled, and the burden fell entirely on me. Not long after, I found out he had been seeing someone else and she was pregnant. He married her just 3 weeks after kicking me out, as if our relationship was just a broken dream. I fell into a deep depression, lost all will to live. My body was as thin as a skeleton. My mother had to take me for inpatient treatment, and there I started to learn how to get through it. It took 6 months before I dared to leave the house and interact with the world again. When I started to recover, the nightmare returned. He kept calling and texting up to 60 messages a day. "Can we talk? Let's meet. I miss you so much." Then one evening, he texted that he was standing outside my dorm door, a building he had no right to enter. I knew I wasn't strong enough to face it, so I ignored everything. But then emails flooded in with pleas to come back. He said he made a mistake and wanted to pick up where we left off, but I realized how crazy that was. He already had a wife and a baby on the way. I thought this isn't a small mistake, but a pattern of bad behavior, so I didn't reply. Then he sent expensive gifts to my mother's house, but I told her to refuse them and say she didn't know where I was. His emails became frantic, accusing the other woman of lying, threatening him, saying he never wanted to cheat or marry her, even hated her. I wondered if he was addicted to something because this behavior was too bizarre and illogical. Finally, my friends started complaining because he was involving them, sending them messages to ask about me, making everyone tired and worried. That fear still haunts me like a shadow that won't let go, reminding me that the past always finds a way to come back. I continue this story with the shadows still lingering in my mind like ghosts that never fade away. These events are not just memories, but deep scars reminding me of human fragility in the face of relentless predators. He didn't stop at direct harassment. He started involving others in his sick game. His employees, perhaps cousins, were tasked with contacting my friends, trying to arrange a surprise meeting to fix everything. The idea sent shivers down my spine. Not just him, but a whole network was closing in like spiders spinning webs around my life. I wasn't there, but the thought that someone had let him in made me tremble, as if an invisible hand was touching my neck. My friends were bothered. My sister had strangers showing up at her workplace. His cousin followed my mother in the mall, and my best friend was constantly stalked as if they were targets in a terrifying hunt. Every time I heard about it, I felt fear spreading like a cold mist enveloping me, making me feel unsafe anywhere. Things escalated when he tried to infiltrate deeper. He knew I was in therapy, perhaps through some loophole in my life, and he showed up a few times at the facility demanding information about my appointments and health status. That was crossing the line, forcing me to call the police, and they had to intervene, but the fear had already settled deep in my bones. I became extremely paranoid, always feeling like someone was watching my every move. Then, one evening, I received a voicemail from him, his voice echoing in the phone like a whisper from hell. He talked about his wife giving birth, that he would divorce her as soon as everything was over, and he wanted to see me that night. He reminisced about beautiful memories, but then added the cold line, "The baby can have my name, but I don't want anything to do with it." His words made me feel disgusted, like a sophisticated manipulation game, focused only on me and our past. I thought he is so cruel, and I replied with a short message. "Stop, don't look for me anymore. Take care of your wife and your first child." But instead of ending, that message only made things worse. Now he follows me everywhere. A black van waits on every corner, and I recognize his employees sitting inside, their eyes sad, making a "I'm sorry" gesture as if forced. They were ordered to follow me until they found the new man in my life, or convinced me to come back. He had kicked his wife and the baby out of the house, and he said he wouldn't give up on us. I quickly texted back, telling him to leave immediately, that his action was wrong and scary. The feeling of being surrounded drove me crazy. He was everywhere like a darkness that couldn't be dispelled. My mental health deteriorated rapidly, and I decided I had to escape to save myself. I planned a long vacation, closed all social media, and secretly took a taxi to the airport at midnight, hoping to disappear from his radar. But when I landed in Vancouver just 6 hours later, emails from him flooded in, demanding to know where I was. He even flew after me, declaring he wouldn't stop until we met again and got back together. I couldn't believe it, and I hoped he wouldn't discover my next itinerary. I used a trick, saying I was willing to meet him at Stanley Park around the time my flight to New Zealand was taking off, a way to escape the trap. From then on, my life changed completely. I moved to New Zealand, a distant place to escape that madness. 10 years have passed and the harassment has only recently subsided, but he still appears via Twitter, via government work emails, even flying to Auckland twice just to accidentally meet me. His recent messages are full of regret. We should have been together forever. Your daughter isn't mine, but you are still the love of my life. That obsession still lingers like an unending curse. Now, I have to admit I've always been sensitive to things like this. It's hard to explain without sounding crazy, but I have the ability to feel things. Sometimes it's just a feeling or a physical reaction to places or people. My family has a long history of violence through many generations. Terrifying experiences, both supernatural and real, in a backward environment with brutal views on women. I believe that from those traumas I can pick up subtle changes in the atmosphere, like sensing emotions around me easily. Instead of stopping, Asher sent screenshots from his phone displaying all my personal information: home address, dorm room number, parents' names, siblings, even pet names, and daily schedule. For example, I know when my father is home by the heavy, somber feeling that covers the house, or when I need to hide because the air is full of hot electric spikes making everything so tense, I have to be on guard. These feelings are not a curse, but a warning from the past helping me survive the storms of life. I continue telling this story where old memories are like ghosts wandering in the night, always ready to rise up and pull me into the abyss of the past. My sensitivity to the environment is not something I can control. It's like a gift and a curse, always warning me of what's about to happen. I can tell when my father is angry, even before seeing or hearing him. The atmosphere in the house changes suddenly, as if a dark cloud covers everything, making me feel like I'm waiting for something to shatter and nothing good will come after that. It's a heavy, foreboding feeling, making my heart pound and my body tense like a wild animal preparing to face danger. My house is in an old mining town where death seems to be a part of daily life, lurking on every street and in every house. I couldn't escape it until I was older. That town was once bustling during the gold rush, but now it's just a faint trace, with the large mines still operating while others have closed. Our house is one of the original buildings built when the town was first formed, carrying a complex history. Stories of ancient practices and indigenous territory, as if this place is a layered soil between past and present. Our neighbors were built on ancient burial grounds, a confirmed fact, and many houses even predate the town's existence. Death came from a strange illness and many other causes, making the air always heavy. My family is part of the first miners living here for 5 generations, until recently when my parents decided to sell the house. I hope that house won't be bought by anyone, even burned down, because the thought of someone living there terrifies me. I'd rather buy it back and leave it empty if I had the money, so those memories don't harm anyone else. Now, speaking of my first memory related to the supernatural, it's hard to start because so much has happened. Let's start with the first memory when I was only 4 years old. I woke up and saw the woman in my room singing to me. She sang every night in a beautiful language I had never heard before. Not English or Spanish, the languages my family used. But that memory happened in the morning, not at night, and the song seemed sad, as if she was carrying some pain. I had the feeling I had to follow her, a strange pull I couldn't resist, so I quietly followed. Our house had a strange design, rooms connected to a common living area where the kitchen and living room were heated by a fireplace and cooled by a cellar. It was like a large rectangle, with the kitchen to the left of the center and the main door at the bottom. When I reached the kitchen area, she waved and smiled as if about to leave. At that time, I thought she was a normal person who actually existed like anyone else. She didn't speak English or Spanish, but I remember clearly that she loved me very much. Always appeared when bad things happened, sang to me, and was there when I was scared. She was a source of comfort, like an invisible protector. However, when she seemed about to leave, I became sad and cried hysterically, begging her not to go. The expression on her face, that sad smile, is still vivid in my mind after 30 years. She turned towards the door, then walked out, through the wall where a door used to be. I didn't know about the history of that wall until I was in my 20s, when I found out it used to be an entrance, and from then on, I never saw her again. My heart stopped as I read those lines. I always kept my privacy, only having Instagram with a few vague posts, and I didn't understand how he got all of it. Thinking about that morning still makes me sad to this day, not knowing where she went. I hope to see her again someday, but perhaps that's just a distant dream. My mother found me crying, and I knew that telling the truth would only make things worse, so I never told her, and probably never will. From that day on, all the truly bad things started happening as if the door to the other world had opened and darkness began to fill my life. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have found their way in and our lives became a maze of fear and mystery. What started as a vague memory of a woman singing a lullaby has now turned into a continuous stream of strange phenomena, as if a small hole has opened up in the house and things from the other side are leaking in, creeping into every corner of our lives. After that experience, everything seemed to change. I felt like a small hole had appeared, and unexplainable things started flooding in. Not long after, my uncle, whom I loved dearly, became seriously ill, a sudden and violent illness. He passed away in the very room I used to sleep in, and that death was truly a big shock to the family. Even though I was young, the memory of him is strangely clear, the violent coughing fits, and his effort to pretend everything was okay, even though we knew it wasn't. That morning, my grandmother told us he had passed away during the night, and his body had been taken to the funeral home. The way she announced it made everything even colder, as if death was too familiar in this house. Our family often moved rooms to avoid painful memories, but it seemed impossible to escape the darkness that was enveloping us. After my uncle's death, his presence appeared frequently, not just to me, but to the whole family and visitors. My grandmother often cried and spoke to him, "Go now, son. Go to heaven." I also joined in calling him by his affectionate name and saying, "Uncle, you'll make the angels cry if you don't let go." We tried to persuade him to leave, but he seemed stuck like a soul who couldn't find his way out. A few months later, because our family was so poor, I was forced to move into my uncle's room. There was no other option, either sleep there or lie on the cold floor. The first night, I couldn't sleep because of a strange darkness like a shape that shouldn't be there. I realized it was my uncle, and despite being scared, I tried to sleep. But then I was woken up by the feeling of falling onto the bed from above, as if someone lifted me up and dropped me from over a meter high, making me bounce several times. That was the moment I knew that what was happening wasn't just an illusion. When I opened my eyes, I saw black matter surrounding me, not like smoke, but moving like smoke, yet it was a dark void like the absence of light. I jumped out of bed, too scared to do anything but stand and watch. The black matter gradually disappeared into the middle of the mattress, as if it was hiding in the place where my uncle used to lie. From then on, I never slept in that room again. I ran to sleep with my brother on his small bed, then on the floor. Every time I passed the room door, I always felt a malevolent shadow watching, making me not dare to look directly at it. That feeling was like being with an abuser, where you just bow your head, look down at the floor, and don't dare to make eye contact because it seems to challenge you to look back. The phenomena escalated. That darkness sometimes threw things lunged and made strange noises, making the atmosphere in the house chaotic. Many nights we woke up to the sound of dishes flying from the kitchen into the room, as if an invisible storm was brewing. To protect ourselves, we could only lock the doors tightly. Only my grandmother's room and the bathroom had doors, and made a rule not to leave anything on the countertops. All kitchen cabinets were locked with front door locks, the kind that require force to open, and even the refrigerator was locked to prevent things from being thrown out. Despite that, we still often woke up to milk or food spilled all over the living room and bedrooms. Finally, things became too much to bear, so my grandmother invited the priest to the house. He came every weekend trying to bring peace, and that continued until she became frail and had to go to a nursing home. But when the priest stopped coming and my grandmother passed away, everything seemed to explode. I believe that even though he wasn't religious, he had been holding back something evil, and now it had complete control. The activity skyrocketed. Not just broken items like vases or cups, but many other things seemingly centered around the cellar and the kitchen pantry, as if that was the eye of the storm. To forget the sadness, I downloaded Tinder and started swiping, hoping to find new experiences. The feeling of being violated made me panic, as if someone had rummaged through my life without leaving a trace. It felt like there was more movement, and the house became unbearable. I realize this story has been long, and there are still many things I haven't mentioned. Other experiences I keep to myself because they are too terrifying to tell completely. But like this, you can get a sense of the darkness I've lived through, and how it still haunts me to this day. I continue this story where the shadows seem to never stop, always finding a way to creep into everyday life, turning ordinary moments into unforgettable terror. As I said, everything in that old house was just the beginning of a longer series of events. And now I want to share about what happened in another place, a large cow field behind my house. But first, let me tell you about my plan. I plan to post more parts later, telling 1 or 2 stories at a time, and I'm willing to answer any questions you have. However, talking about these things is really difficult because they don't seem real even to myself. Some experiences are so hard to describe, I might never tell them all because they sound like made-up stories, and if my family hadn't witnessed them, I would surely think I was going crazy. Then let's move on to the events in that field. Within a few months, I had a series of strange experiences around that area as if it was a hotspot for unexplainable things. The cow field was large with green grass and a peaceful atmosphere during the day, but when dusk fell, it became a place filled with strange figures. It was where I often walked my puppy, and those walks turned into nightmares. The first time, when I had just adopted the 11-week-old puppy, a friendly pup loved everyone, always wagging his tail and running to anyone, we went to the field at dusk. There weren't many people around, only a person walking far away who was getting closer. The dog, usually very cheerful, suddenly stopped, lay close to the ground, and started barking and growling, a completely strange behavior. The person was too far away for me to see their face clearly, but the dog was truly panicking. As he got closer, I felt a sense of unease rising. The way he moved was like a machine, walking quickly, steadily, like the steps of a soldier or a robot, not natural at all. His skin was pale, his eyes empty as if he didn't see us, even though we were right there. He didn't pay any attention to us, just walked past, and the dog barked loudly, whining with sounds I had never heard from him before. The feeling when he walked past was like being punched in the stomach. Pure terror, as if facing evil. It was the most terrifying encounter I had ever experienced. His eyes didn't move at all, as if we didn't exist. He continued to power walk towards the large hill where darkness was covering a completely illogical direction. As soon as he was out of sight, we ran like crazy towards home, as if something was chasing us from behind. A few months later in the same field, the story repeated itself. The dog was still as friendly as before, especially with strangers. He would usually run up and ask for pets. This time, there was a group of people walking with backpacks looking at a map. The dog was initially very curious, wagging his tail and approaching, but then he suddenly focused on a woman standing still, observing a tree. The dog lay close to the ground, growling and whining, exactly like the last time. The woman didn't look at us at all, just stood there with empty eyes. Her skin was also strangely pale. When I looked closely at her face, I felt that terror again. Her face was quite normal, but her nose was almost non-existent, just faint lines as if deformed by some force. It made me think of bizarre images from comic books, but it wasn't because of her appearance, because the dog reacted before she turned around. It was a feeling rising from deep within, a familiar fear making me know that we had to leave immediately. And then the third time, that was the time that panicked me the most. We had just left the house to walk the dog, but when we got to the door, I realized I forgot something inside. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become a part of my life, always lurking in places that seem safest. As I mentioned the third time in that series of events in the field, panicked me. And now I will share more details, with details that still send shivers down my spine every time I remember them. We had just left the house to walk the dog, but when we got to the door, I realized I forgot something inside, so we went back for a moment. The house I lived in was in an area considered the safest. No cars, just mud cows and dogs running around freely. I lived on a boat by the river, where the dog would often wander out to greet people because he was so friendly it was indescribable. When we went out again, I saw a man in a business suit standing completely still, staring at the dog. The dog, instead of barking and growling like the previous times, just stood still, looking back at him as if in a silent confrontation. The scene was so bizarre. A man in a neat suit in a muddy field with a curious gaze, as if he had never seen a dog before, yet not scared or threatening. He looked at the dog with genuine curiosity, like an outsider observing something strange, and his suit looked like someone was trying to pretend to be human, but got it completely wrong, not fitting the surroundings. My friend and I stood at the door, witnessing that stare down last for over a minute, the air so tense it was suffocating. I immediately blocked him on all platforms and reported him to the school, hoping they would handle it. Then he started walking, crossing the gate, and entering the field, the very place where the strange encounters had happened before. We decided to follow because we were also going in that direction. He walked along the path leading up the hill just like the first person I met, and we just walked straight towards the pub where we intended to go. In that moment, I couldn't help but think of my origin. Do you realize I'm from England? A clumsy remark in the midst of panic, as if trying to cling to a bit of normalcy in a world that was turning upside down. But then when I realized I had forgotten my wallet again, I turned back, and that's when things got scarier. He was standing at the gate we had just passed through, just standing there, and staring at it occasionally, lifting the latch as if checking it, a meaningless and creepy action. That's so weird and creepy, I told myself, wondering what he was doing. He walked back and forth, then returned to check the latch again like a machine without a purpose. I decided not to go back for my wallet because I didn't want to pass him again. Safety was more important than anything at that moment. Just a few months later, in the same field during a walk with the dog, my boyfriend came along. He told me to go ahead into the field while he got ready, so I and the dog went in. Immediately, I saw another person power walking like a robot towards us from the hill where the first person had gone. It wasn't the same person, but I immediately recognized that strange energy, a feeling of wrongness making my stomach clench. He walked exactly like the previous people with dead eyes and an unhealthy presence. I tried to avoid him by pretending to chase the dog in the opposite direction, waiting for him to pass the gate before returning to the path. But just 2 minutes later, I felt something was wrong, and when I turned back, he was rushing towards us at terrifying speed, those dead eyes not blinking at all. The blood in my veins seemed to freeze. I had never been so scared. He was walking so fast, it seemed like he was chasing us, and we just ran, the dog running beside me, both of us, like we were racing against the darkness. I tried to get my phone to call my boyfriend, but he didn't answer. We turned off the path cut through the tall grass, making a large curve to get back to the gate. That weird, alien-like man continued to power walk up the path he had just come down. Finally, I saw my boyfriend coming sweating from running. I rushed to him, stammering about the strange walker with bad energy, hoping that someone would believe and understand the terror I was experiencing. Those moments still haunt me as a reminder that no matter how far we run, darkness always finds a way to find us. I continue this story where the shadows seem to never let go, always rising from the deepest parts of memory and reality, turning life into a maze filled with unexplainable mysteries. As I shared about the strange encounters in the field, now I will lead you into the next chapters where fear escalates and spreads to new aspects, leaving me unforgettable. What happened next reinforced the belief that there are things in this world beyond our understanding, and sometimes we can only run, not confront. When I ran to my boyfriend trying to explain about the strange walker, he asked where I turned and pointed, and both of us were stunned to see him. Not walking normally, but power walking backward like a reversed puppet, his eyes still locked on us. He continued towards the hill, but completely in reverse without blinking or changing expression. "Oh my God, what is happening?" I exclaimed, and my boyfriend was equally shocked. Both of us felt a chill down our spines, sharing the same terror. All those encounters happened in the summer when the air seemed to be accumulating strange energy, as if nature was preparing for the supernatural storms to come. Then, when autumn came, everything changed again. I lived alone on the boat by the river with the dog, as my only companion because my boyfriend had to work far away. Late one night, after participating in a competition at the pub, I walked home around midnight. The country road was pitch black, my phone was dead, so I had no flashlight, only the moonlight and twinkling stars for company. I fumbled through the bushes and fences, bumping into them constantly, but the air still held a strange beauty, as if the universe was whispering secrets. When I reached the bridge to cross the river, I looked up at the sky, and at first I thought it was just a plane flying steadily towards me from the hill and the field, the very place where those strange individuals had appeared. But then, as I observed more closely, the object seemed to suddenly look back at me as if it recognized my presence. I don't know how to describe it. It felt like we connected a deep connection, perhaps spiritual, which sent shivers down my spine. In just a moment, the object shot off to the left at terrifying speed, then disappeared as if it had never existed. I realized it was a UFO hovering over the hill where those terrifying figures had walked, and fear flooded through me. But the school did nothing, just saying they would look into it, while Asher kept appearing all over campus trying to approach me whenever he saw me. I ran home like crazy, bumping into bushes along the way, rushed into the boat and locked the door tightly, then hid under the covers, like a child afraid of the dark. My heart pounded, and I wondered if what I saw was real or just an illusion due to fatigue. A month later, around 4 a.m., the dog woke me up because he needed to go out. I was half asleep, opened the door for him, and when I stuck my head out to call him back, I was blinded by a bright white light. The air around was pitch black as usual in this remote countryside. No streetlights, no light pollution, just stars and moon, so that light was truly unexplainable. It was a huge white mass of light very low in the sky, so bright I couldn't fully open my eyes. The dog ran back in quickly, and I slammed the door shut, locked it, trying to go back to sleep, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. Looking back, I feel like it was a you saw nothing moment, a strange feeling as if someone was erasing my memory. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but now it doesn't make sense at all. Why would I just dismiss it like that? Recently, I went back to that place to check to see if there were new street lights or any source of light, but there was nothing. It's an unsolved mystery, only reinforcing my fear. I don't know what those experiences mean, but after all that, I decided to move back to the mainland away from that hill and field. Since then, everything seems to have stopped, as if that place was the source of all the strange things. One morning, I tried going up the hill to explore, hoping to find answers, but only found a beautiful picnic spot, nothing like the alien headquarters I had imagined. Just a peaceful place, but for me it's still an unhealed scar. Now let's move on to another chapter where the shadows are no longer in the field, but creep into family traditions. That's the cemetery where my aunt used to make me go 4 times a year to bring flowers for my grandparents and her ex-boyfriend, a man named Hiram, whom she considered the love of her life. She always brought flowers to his grave even on Mother's Day, even though he passed away in a terrible car accident. Hiram had bought a ring to propose to her, and that death left a deep wound in her heart, like an indelible curse. Recently, I discovered something new about Hiram, something I never knew before, a secret that could change the way I see everything, but I'm not ready to share the details right now. It makes me wonder, are those shadows related to the family's past, or just a part of the lingering pain? I continue this story where the shadows seem to have spread from family memories, turning seemingly ordinary moments into terrifying curses, always whispering dark secrets. As I shared about the strange phenomena in the field and their meaning, now I want to lead you deeper into the flow of my family's past, where a prayer can become a double-edged sword, and the repetition of history sends shivers down my spine. These stories are not just memories, they are cracks in the soul, reminders that sometimes what we wish for can come back to haunt us forever. I discovered a new truth about Hiram, my aunt's ex-boyfriend, something I never knew before. In the final months of their relationship, he had become very unpleasant with controlling and toxic behaviors. He started forbidding her from seeing male friends, monitoring her every activity, and constantly interfering with how she lived, as if trying to isolate her from the outside world. There was a specific moment when he raised his hand as if about to do something bad, forcing her to face real fear. Despite that, she still loved him, but she realized that if she continued, her life would be stifled forever. That's why she decided not to go further, even though he was preparing for a future together. Then she prayed, a silent plea, "Lord, please take him away from me." Not long after, Hiram passed away in a car accident, and that coincidence made her live in torment for so many years. She blamed herself, thinking that prayer had brought about the result, and now she still brings flowers to his grave as a form of penance. From my perspective at the time, it just seemed like a strange event, a twisted coincidence, but it left a deep mark, as if fate was playing hide and seek with us. After Hiram's death, my aunt lived mostly alone, only occasionally dating, and dedicated all her time to the family as a way to fill the void. But 3 years ago, she met an old flame, completely by chance, and they quickly reconnected. They tried to maintain the relationship, despite living in different states with flights and buses, seemingly a romantic story. However, this man also revealed a not good nature with similar controlling behaviors. He started interfering with how she spent money, advising her not to spend too much on the family, leading her to cut back on annual trips and give cheaper gifts. Even though it was her money, I clearly saw how it affected everyone around. like an invisible string tightening around her life. Increasingly, he became more confident, thinking he had completely controlled her. He got angry if she didn't answer the phone and demanded she report all her activities, where she went with whom and when she would be back. It was like a terrifying loop where history repeated itself with no escape. Now I always have to be vigilant, bowing my head and running away whenever I see his figure from afar, my heart pounding as if it's about to break. Recently in a conversation, my aunt expressed her frustration with him, and then she blurted out, "Lord, please take him." She suddenly stopped, startled. "Oh no, I shouldn't say it all. Last time he listened." Immediately he disappeared. No calls for 4 days, a sudden change from constantly bothering her. No one could reach him, and my aunt started to worry, thinking he had broken up without saying a word. I thought differently. Could it be that prayer had worked again? It sent chills down my spine like a curse that was secretly active. My aunt's worry grew and we tried to find information. My family decided to ignore unrelated drama, but since he had many siblings, we contacted him through his younger brother who was dating my Aunt C, someone younger and not directly involved. My mother asked Aunt C if there was any news, and Aunt C promised to ask. Later, Aunt C called back. He hadn't shown up for several days, and his family was thinking about replacing him in the band as if he was just a replaceable part. Even his younger brother didn't seem to care much, not knowing where he was. To this day, I still don't have a clear answer. This story makes me wonder, do prayers really bring results, or is it just a terrifying coincidence? It's like a warning from the past that sometimes what we wish for can come back like a ghost, and my family seems unable to escape that loop. I directly begged him to leave me alone, but my words seemed to only make him more persistent. I will stop here, but the shadows continue waiting to be told more. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have spread from my family to other stories like an invisible network connecting lost souls and indelible fear. What I've told about my aunt and her prayer is just the tip of the iceberg, and now I want to share another story. Not mine, but of an old friend whom I met on my journey to find answers to my own experiences. He agreed to recount it after years of silence, and his story made me realize that we are never truly alone in the dark. Let me tell his words as he shared them with me with all their truth and creepiness. First, to clarify about the previous part about the other guy's younger brother and my Aunt C. Initially, he wasn't a bad guy to Aunt C. Aunt C thought he was only interested in her money, but then they genuinely fell in love and now they visit each other regularly, turning initial suspicions into a sincere relationship. That's a rare piece of light in this mess. As for my aunt in that story, she has a very unpleasant personality, always in conflict with everyone, including my mother. They argued, and as a result, she blocked my mother and me by extension on WhatsApp. We are no longer in contact, but I assume she is still alive as no one has reported any sad news, even though she has friction with most of the other aunts. Only a few people still call her, and I hope everything will be okay. I promise to update if there's any new information, especially if if anything happens related to that boyfriend. Now moving on to the other story. Let me tell you about the 29-year-old guy living on the West Coast whom I met and convinced to share. He's only recently started to be interested in paranormal things again, although when he was little he was obsessed with ghost stories. But then, at age 17, an incident scared him so much that he avoided the topic for 12 years. Only now, after more than a decade without any more phenomena, does he feel brave enough to speak out. At that time, he was 17, working part-time at a small business in a tiny town in the American Midwest, where there were only a few thousand people. The business was located on the town square on the second floor of an old brick building built nearly 100 years ago. The ground floor was a furniture store, and to get upstairs you had to go through a glass door with a sturdy deadbolt, then climb a long, straight staircase. That's where he worked, teaching a self-defense class and occasionally cleaning. His job wasn't bad for a teenager, teaching a self-defense class one evening a week, occasionally opening up before class, and cleaning at least once a week on his days off. The cleaning job only involved vacuuming and wiping windows and mirrors. Not very complicated, just a simple side hustle. Then on a weekend day off, he decided to stop by to clean, and he brought his girlfriend. The reason was to avoid someone seeing the car and thinking there was a class, so they locked the door from the inside. The sound of the deadbolt clicking echoed clearly like an affirmation that no one could enter. They climbed the long stairs and started working. They worked quickly, vacuuming the floors, wiping everything down. because as two energetic teenagers, they didn't have much quiet private time. After finishing, they spent a brief moment together on the floor of the front office. Not professional, but he thought it was okay at the time because the town square was deserted, the stores were closed, and the front door was securely locked. Only his boss had a key, and the boss was out of town. After that moment, he went towards the bathroom in the back. On his way back to the front, he walked right in front of the stairs, and then he heard something. Footsteps, slow, heavy, of a man climbing the long stairs in the front. The sound of the footsteps. Then, a few years later, when I was 21 and had a 4-month-old son, another incident happened as if the fear had never left. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become an inseparable part of life, creeping into the most ordinary moments and turning them into prolonged nightmares. As I began telling the story of the 29-year-old guy whom I convinced to share his 17-year-old experience, now I will go deeper into the details, where fear is not just a fleeting moment, but a persistent force haunting every step. Let me recount his words with truth and detail, as the memory has been etched into his mind, keeping him silent for over a decade. When he heard those slow, heavy footsteps, his first thought was to run, an instinctive reaction when caught off guard. But then a second thought quickly came. This is impossible. He had personally locked the front door, an old lock with a deadbolt that clicked loudly every time it was turned, and no one could enter without making a loud noise. Despite that, burning curiosity overcame fear. He walked towards the stairs against all reason, hoping that when he looked down, he would see only an illusion. He told himself that the empty steps would prove that everything was just a product of his imagination. But reality was completely different. The footsteps continued to echo, getting closer and clearer, as if challenging his logic. And then he saw it. It was late one evening. I was at the mall to collect donations for a cat rescue fund, waiting for my sister to start her shift at 6 p.m. It was a human-shaped black shadow. Not a flat shadow from some light source, but a solid form, like a person covered in an invisible layer of darkness. It was climbing the stairs with a tall, broad-shouldered shape, but no hair, no face or features to identify. Just a vague entity like a ghost formed from the darkness itself. It moved straight towards him as if it had its own consciousness. When its head appeared first, followed by its shoulders and body, he felt a strange connection, as if it looked up and was surprised to see him there. He looked directly at where its eyes should have been, and in a brief moment, less than a fraction of a second, it seemed to look back, creating a silent, tense exchange. Then suddenly it recoiled, as if startled, and disappeared completely, as if it had never existed, leaving an empty space. He blinked repeatedly, trying to regain his composure, then walked to the top of the stairs and looked down, hoping to see someone playing a prank or a logical explanation. But there was nothing, just empty space, just as he had initially predicted. He asked himself again, I locked the front door, didn't I? A question echoing in his head as if trying to cling to the truth. Immediately after, he returned to his girlfriend, quickly got dressed, and left the place without saying a word about what had happened. I was sitting, relaxing, eating and browsing Reddit, then decided to go to the parking lot about 70 feet away to smoke, a bad habit I knew I shouldn't do. He didn't want to scare her, and also didn't think she would believe him. So he pushed everything into the dark corner of his mind, considering it a bizarre hallucination, something that couldn't have happened because no one could have gotten in with the door locked and the town square deserted. He tried to dismiss all other reasons. For example, maybe it was someone's shadow walking on the sidewalk below, but the light from the front door only reached the first step, and that didn't explain how the black shadow was climbing closer. There was no logical reason, so he tried to forget. But the story didn't end there. After that night, he never saw the black shadow again, but the feeling of being watched still lingered every time he entered the building. Every class he had to unlock the door and climb the dark stairs, and occasionally he would hear faint footsteps as if someone was following an invisible entity full of hostility, not wanting him to be there. That feeling made him feel like he was trespassing on someone's territory, a place that wasn't welcoming. Finally, the fear was too much. He didn't want to be alone anymore. He brought his girlfriend with him a second time, and she also started complaining about the feeling of being watched. During the day, the building was just a normal place, but at night it turned into a place filled with living shadows, reminding him that once you touch the other side, it won't easily let go. The parking lot was well lit near the main entrance, and since it was late, I thought it was safe there. His story is a reminder that terror doesn't always end at the peak moment. Sometimes it's a long shadow stretching over time, and only when we share can we find a little light. I will stop here, but these stories continue waiting to be told more. I continue this story where the shadows seem to never truly disappear, but only wait in the darkness to rise, turning ordinary moments into eternal terror. As I told the story of the 29-year-old guy with the human-shaped black shadow, now I will lead you through deeper layers, where that fear doesn't just stop, but spreads, affecting his daily life, and then goes back to childhood memories where another strange image was etched into his mind. Let me continue telling with detail and emotion, as ghost stories often do. They don't just tell what happened, but also how they change people forever. The heavy and creepy feeling started to increase around dusk, and by night it became more terrifying than ever, as if darkness was when the invisible entities woke up. This happened right around the time he was about to graduate from high school, and then the boss decided to close the business because it was no longer profitable. Losing the job was sad, but he felt very happy not to have to step into that place anymore, as if finally he had escaped an invisible prison where every breath was watched by something untouchable. About a year later, when he was in a new relationship, he decided to tell the story to his new girlfriend. She was curious and wanted to check it out, so one night he drove to the front of the building thinking that after all this time, surely everything was safe. Suddenly, a security guard appeared patrolling. He was about my height, Indian, with an initially friendly look on his face. But immediately he felt it, like being watched by someone. That feeling made him realize that whatever was there, it had never left. It was like someone was standing at the top of the stairs looking down with an indescribable hatred and malice, a pressure he couldn't bear. His girlfriend also felt it, immediately panicked and demanded to leave, and he sped away without hesitation, as if fleeing an approaching storm. Even after more than 10 years, he still feels uncomfortable driving past the building at night when visiting his parents. He doesn't know exactly what he saw, only that it was clearly attached to the building and either couldn't or wouldn't leave. He hopes someone can offer an opinion on this, so he feels like he didn't lose his mind as a teenager. An admission that sometimes the truth is scarier than imagination. Now let's go back to his childhood, where the first shadows began. It's a story involving him and his brother when his mother was the assistant director for the church's children's choir. His mother often gave rides to children who needed a lift, and there was a pair of brothers living nearby, so they often took them home after each practice. Then I matched with Asher, a guy who looked pretty pleasant in his profile picture. He stopped and asked, "How are you? Are you okay?" One night everything was as usual. They piled into his mother's SUV after practice. It was already dark. His mother always got out to take the children to the door while he sat in the passenger seat, and his brother sat in the back seat. Then his brother uttered the strangest sentence. "There's a man with a dog's head looking out the window." He turned, thinking his brother was joking, and asked what. His brother pointed towards the house across the street, and when he looked, he saw it. Indeed, there was a figure, a man with the head of a white dog standing silently at the second-floor window. He didn't say anything, just sat there and stared, trying to focus to see more clearly, even though the image was somewhat blurry, as if covered by fog. He knew clearly what he was seeing and felt that the entity was not physical. It was like a ghost, untouchable, and he was afraid that if he looked away, it would disappear. Time seemed to stretch on forever in that moment. He didn't feel scared, but only curious and surprised, as if witnessing a secret of the universe. Then his mother returned to the car, breaking the concentration. I replied, "I'm pretty good, just waiting for my sister to go to work." He quickly told his mother to look out the window, pointing repeatedly, but she was just confused and slightly amused, thinking they were being mischievous. His mother looked in the direction they pointed, asking where, but no matter how hard they tried to explain, she saw nothing. That was the moment when the truth became clear. Not everyone could see those shadows, and they only chose certain people to haunt. This story still leaves a lingering effect as a reminder that this world is full of unexplainable things, and sometimes sharing is the only way to combat the loneliness of fear. I will stop here, but the shadows continue, waiting to be explored further. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become a permanent part of life, always lurking in childhood memories and turning them into endless whispers of terror. As I told the story of the 29-year-old guy with the strange figure and persistent haunting, now I will lead you into another chapter. A story from his own childhood where childlike curiosity meets unexplainable entities, creating indelible mental scars. These stories are not just narratives. They are pieces of a larger picture where reality and illusion intertwine, making us wonder if we are truly alone. After the moment of seeing the figure with the dog's head, he and his brother tried to convince their mother to look closer, but she just said it was the house of an old couple from the church, then drove past. They continued to stare at that window the whole way, and the figure was still there, standing silently as if watching them, not moving at all. He nodded. "That's good. Your baby is very cute. I have 4 at home." When they got home, he and his brother tried to tell their father and grandmother and kept reminding their mother, but the family only listened indifferently, as if thinking they were making things up or confused about something. He knew clearly they were being seen as imaginative children, so finally he and his brother decided not to mention it anymore, even when talking to each other, a voluntary silence as if to protect each other from ridicule. Time passed, but that memory still haunted him. Every time he took the younger children home, he would look up at that window, hoping and fearing that the figure would appear again, but it never returned. Now at age 22, that memory has faded like a dream. He has trouble remembering the exact year or age, only knowing it was around 8 to 10 years old when he first started participating in the children's choir. Recently, he watched a YouTube video about urban legends mentioning people with dog heads, and that stirred everything up again. He needed to know what he really saw, so he posted the story to connect with others, asking if anyone had witnessed something similar, hoping that sharing would help him feel like he didn't lose his mind in that memory. Now let's move on to another story from his childhood. Another event where darkness first crept into everyday life. It was when he was little, living in an apartment with his father and brother. As a little girl who hated going to bed early, she would often sneak out of bed at night, running around the living room in the dark, lit by the faint light from the balcony glass door. Then he asked about my husband, and I said yes, he is my child's father. One night when she snuck out, checked if her brother was fast asleep, they shared a bunk bed, then snuck out to the living room with the door open just in case she started playing, jumping on the sofa. Then suddenly she noticed a black shadow from the balcony, a pitch-black silhouette standing next to the door near the doorknob. She panicked, stopped and stared, then ran straight back to bed and closed the door. The panic woke her brother, and he worriedly asked what was wrong. She told him about the black figure, and her brother, with his protective nature, decided to go check. He opened the door and went out while she watched from inside the room. A minute later, he returned saying he didn't see anything, so everything was surely fine. She accepted that reassurance and went back to bed. But then she realized her brother had left the door open, so she crawled out to close it. Before her hand could reach it, the door suddenly slammed shut with a loud bang, startling her. The noise woke her brother, and she quickly explained while her brother was just confused. She was too scared, so she asked to sleep with her brother, and he agreed. Just a minute later, their father walked into the room asking about the noise. She tried to tell him about the figure and the door, but her father didn't believe her because he absolutely didn't believe in supernatural things. He thought one of them had slammed the door hard, even though her brother tried to explain it was the wind, but their father knew the windows and balcony door were locked. The air conditioning was off, so he started asking questions to find the culprit. In the middle of her trying to explain that she just wanted to close the door but hadn't touched it, suddenly a loud noise echoed from the living room. Another strange event, as if the darkness was proving its presence, making everything more tense than ever. I continue the story where the shadows seem to have become uninvited guests, always lurking in every corner of life, turning familiar moments into haunting whispers. As I told the childhood experiences of the 29-year-old guy where strange figures and noises crept into daily life, now I will lead you deeper into the flow of those events, where adult skepticism clashes with childlike fear and invisible entities continue to assert their presence. These stories are not just memories, they are cracks in reality, reminding us that sometimes the darkness never truly leaves. When the loud noise echoed from the living room, their father immediately left the room, heading towards it with a surprised look on his face. But he suddenly said, "I can be your husband. I will take care of the baby and take care of you." He turned on the light, and both the little girl and her brother followed closely behind, their hearts pounding. Their father checked around, realizing that there were only 2 doors in the living room, the front door and the balcony door. The front door was still locked tightly. Nothing unusual, but when their father checked the balcony door, it was slightly ajar and unlocked. Their father explained that this door was loose, perhaps it slid back after a hard slam, and that was the reason for the noise. He closed it tightly and locked it, then sent the little girl and her brother back to bed, saying that's the end of it. A quick reassurance, but it didn't completely dispel the lingering fear. However, life in that apartment continued with strange events. They lived there for a few more years, and the little girl occasionally still saw the black figure appear, along with sudden slamming doors or pillows on the sofa being pushed onto the floor for no reason. Their father always tried to find a logical explanation, and gradually the little girl and her brother started to ignore them, just like their father did, as if silence was the way to survive. Then, when their father remarried, their stepmother they moved to a 2-story house, hoping that a new house, new story would bring a bright start. They got another dog and 2 cats, and everything was initially quite normal, as if they had left the shadows behind. Those words stunned me. A chill ran down my spine, and I started to feel extremely anxious. But then one morning, her stepmother asked the little girl if she had folded the dog's blanket. She replied no, and had never touched it. Her stepmother asked her brother, and he also denied it. She said she found the blanket neatly folded and placed on the washing machine, while the dog always slept on its bed and hated it when someone touched its blanket. This was strange, because the blanket was only touched when it was washed, and it had just been washed. Her stepmother quickly thought it was ghost work, because she had seen ghosts when she was young, but her father still insisted that ghosts didn't exist, and perhaps one of them had folded the blanket and forgotten. They continued their day, but that was just the beginning of the events that followed. Soon after, the black figure appeared again in the new house, always standing next to an open door near the doorknob, just like in the old apartment. The little girl started to get really scared, because she usually slept with the door open for the cats to come in, and every creak of the door woke her up, her heart pounding. She tried to ignore it and sleep, but fear still crept in, and she only felt safe when she felt the cat lying next to her. One night, when she was staying up late doing homework, the room door creaked again. Without thinking, she turned back, hoping to see the cat, but instead, it was the black figure standing there like a living shadow. Her heart stopped. Her body froze, unable to move. After only about 10 seconds, the door slammed shut forcefully, and she screamed in fear. Her stepmother and father ran in, asking what happened. The little girl recounted it breathlessly, but her father thought she was tired and imagining things. Her stepmother listened and brought a rosary, hanging it on the doorknob, saying it would keep that thing away. She told the little girl to come to her if she saw it again, as a promise of protection. After that incident, when the little girl went to her biological mother's house, strange phenomena continued, creaking sounds from the ceiling happening regularly from 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. Her mother and her husband thought it was the house settling, or pipes, but the little girl and her brother knew it was too strange to be just that. Even her Rottweiler dog started waking her up with growling, always directed towards the wall next to the bed, as if facing something invisible full of hostility. At those times, she wondered, would the darkness follow them forever? This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become living entities, always trying to creep into daily life, turning peaceful moments into threatening whispers. As I told the experiences of the little girl with the black figure and strange noises, now I will lead you through deeper layers, where fear doesn't just stop at memories, but spreads, affecting even those around her like a curse that cannot be lifted. These stories are not just narratives, they are living memories, reminding us that sometimes silence only makes the darkness stronger. To protect myself, I lied I have a fiancé. The little girl's Rottweiler dog started growling towards the wall next to the bed. At first, she didn't think much of it because he usually barked at windows or doors. But then she realized that this time the dog was growling at the wall, as if facing something hidden inside. Anxiety rose. She slowly crawled out of bed, hugging the dog to comfort him. He stopped growling for a moment, sniffing her as if to check, then continued to stare at the wall. After a few minutes, the dog finally stopped, sniffed her again, then sat down as if guarding. She returned to bed, and the dog put his head next to her pillow until she fell asleep. A protective action that made her feel safer, but also increased her curiosity about what was happening. Not long after the second dog, her mother's Weimaraner also started to get old enough to join in the late nights. He would often come into her room, and then he would also growl towards the wall, even though normally he would only whine or talk and never bark or growl. She did as before, getting out of bed to comfort him until he stopped. But nights like that started to affect her sleep, leaving her in a constant state of tension, as if the darkness was slowly taking over the peace. Finally, after a picture frame above her bed flew onto the floor and shattered, she couldn't keep silent anymore. She told her stepmother everything, and she said that perhaps a spirit or ghost was following her. She warned that it was getting more active, making her more scared than ever, as if those words had opened a door that couldn't be closed. Despite that, she tried to push everything away, telling herself that if she ignored the random slamming doors or the dogs growling, they would disappear. Even the cat started acting strangely around the house, but she persisted with the thought, if I ignore it, it has to go away. She knew she was wrong, but denial was the only way to survive at that moment. When her father moved again, they moved into a brand new house, bought while it was still being built as if to avoid any traces from the past. She was worried that it was still following her, and told her stepmother. She just told her to report it immediately if she saw it again as a promise of continued protection. He ignored it, laughed, and said, "No, no, wife will love the baby, wife will love you. You come home with me." Everything was quiet for a few weeks, but then she started hearing voices. Faint conversations as if from a few rooms away. She would stop to check, but they would go silent whenever she got close. Things escalated when she heard sounds like her father talking, even though she was completely alone. She called out loudly, confused, then looked out the window and saw her father's car hadn't returned yet. A moment that sent shivers down her spine, as if the darkness was imitating loved ones to deceive her. Next were footsteps, always from the upstairs her parents' room. And strangely, they sounded exactly like her father's footsteps with heavy and distinct thuds. Everyone in the house had their own way of walking, and that sound was too familiar for her to deny. When she told her stepmother, she admitted to hearing them too, and even sometimes went into the room to find boxes from the shelves fallen onto the middle of the floor. Even though it was a walk-in closet, they couldn't have fallen like that on their own. Those events further confirmed that the darkness wasn't just an illusion. To this day, she still lives with her father and stepmother while attending college, and the phenomena continue. Fewer sightings of the figure. The doors don't slam hard anymore, but still close, strangely. What's notable is that her friends also started to believe, because these things happen even when she stays over at their houses. One friend who is afraid of ghosts refuses to come to her house, and conversely doesn't like her staying at her place because she also sees the black figure. Now everything has become a joke among friends as a way to cope, but deep down she knows that the darkness is still waiting, ready to rise. This story is still unfinished as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become unwanted companions, always lurking in every breath and turning intimate moments into whispers of unease. As I told the experiences of the little girl with the black figure and the spread of terror, now I will lead you through a new chapter, where fear doesn't just stop at family, but spreads to friends, creating spirals of curiosity and mockery, leading us into another story where the line between reality and the mystical becomes even more blurred. These stories are not just narratives. They are connecting threads, reminding us that sometimes sharing fear is the only way to cope, even if it leads to unpredictable adventures. The little girl's friends started reacting to her stories by teasing, turning the terror into jokes to cope. Like saying, "Now there are 2 guests instead of 1, or remember to close all the doors lest it visit." I quickly put out my cigarette, pushed the baby stroller further away, stepping back while my heart pounded. Some were so curious it was scary, wanting to see the figure with their own eyes, and they would often invite her to their houses or ask her to stay over, just to test it as if playing a dangerous game with the darkness. Those moments created a strange connection, where laughter mixed with suspense, but deep down she knew that not everyone was ready to face that reality. However, she still didn't know what to do with it. She wondered if she should intervene, as the entity had never been actively hostile to anyone, merely causing unease and occasionally breaking a few things as a reminder that it still existed. Nights she slept with the door closed and locked, but then woke up to find the door wide open, making her heart feel squeezed by invisible fear. She apologizes for this long story, but truly she doesn't know what to do, and she craves opinions from others. Perhaps someone can suggest a way to cope, or at least help her feel less alone with those shadows. Then the story shifts to her late teenage years when she met Felix, a social butterfly who knew everyone, and through him she connected with interesting friends. They often hung out, and one night at Felix's house, everyone was playing Risk in a relaxed atmosphere, sharing strange topics as teenagers often do. She told her ghost stories, and this time everyone believed her, a rare validation that made her feel relieved. In that group there was Carly, whose story they called the most nonsensical, saying quickly, "Haha, no thank you, I have to go now." Carly looked like a classic goth girl with striking outfits and heavy makeup, making her look like a character straight out of a mystical world. She was quite pleasant, though a bit reserved about her emotions, and she claimed to be an energy vampire. a term the little girl didn't know at the time, living in rural Newfoundland with limited internet access. Carly explained that she drew energy from others' emotions, could sense auras, detect people's problems, and had to control her emotions because they could become very powerful. The group of friends, especially the little girl and Felix, called it nonsense because they had never seen Carly display any power, and it sounded like bragging from a goth girl. To prove it, Carly did a reading talking about the little girl's emotions, that she was depressed, which wasn't hard to guess in a teenager, and predicted a serious accident about to happen for Felix, which later Felix's mother had a stroke, though not directly related. She said a few more vague things to others, but the truth was still not entirely convincing. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have crossed the boundary of memory, creeping into reality, turning ordinary trips into journeys filled with unease and mystery. As I told the experiences of the little girl with the black figure and the spread of terror through friends, now I will lead you into a new turn, where curiosity leads them to a distant place, and what awaits there could open the door to darker secrets. At first, Asher seemed kind, but a bit socially awkward, which I empathized with because I also struggled with personal anxiety. But he followed me into the mall where most stores were closed, and I ran around trying to escape him. These stories are not just narratives, they are journeys into the heart of fear where every step could be the last. The little girl had a strange habit when she was a passenger in a car. She would fall asleep almost immediately if she wasn't the driver. It was a legacy from long family trips in the past, and now even 5 minutes of being awake was a miracle. She wished this didn't happen because it made her lose control, but this is an important detail, like a red thread leading into what's to come. Then that weekend arrived, and they, the little girl, Felix, and Carly, set off to meet that person. The little girl thought it would just be a simple meeting, perhaps in a basement somewhere, but Carly revealed that Mother Hilda lived on the Bonavista Peninsula, a place about a 3-hour drive away if the weather was good. The little girl couldn't help but be annoyed that she didn't bring snacks, a trivial worry amidst this strange setting. They got into Carly's car. She had a driver's license, and began their journey. As usual, the little girl fell asleep within a few minutes before they even got on the highway. When she woke up, she found herself bouncing on a dusty dirt road in the middle of nowhere with no sign of life. Each of his footsteps echoed in the empty hallway, making me feel like I was being hunted in the dark. Confusion flooded her as if she had stepped into a dark dream where everything familiar was replaced by strangeness. The Bonavista Peninsula, as her wife would later describe it, was like walking on the graves of millions of angry souls with a gloomy sky and a landscape that clung like glue, creating a feeling that someone was watching from the edge of the woods where you couldn't see. The little girl hated this place even though she knew the people here were mostly kind, but those who had lived there for a long time seemed to carry a lingering sadness as if the land itself was sucking away hope. The road they were on was just a tiny, insignificant road full of potholes and dust. The little girl immediately complained, asking repeatedly, "Where are we? Why are we here? What are you planning?" But Carly just repeated, "Mother Hilda will answer," in a cold tone like the whisper of a madwoman. Felix was silent, just looking with a slightly amused expression, as if enjoying a bizarre play. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a clearing where the trees were sparser. In the middle of it was a classic Newfoundland-style house. Box-shaped but in indescribably bad condition. No sign of care. For hundreds of years, the roof looked like it was about to collapse. The windows were still there, but covered in dust, and the dull green color had faded. The road stopped about 100 meters from the house, adding to the isolation. I ran into Coles, hoping to lose him in the maze of clothing racks and shelves. Carly stopped the car, got out, and repeated the phrase again. "Mother Hilda will answer." The little girl looked at Felix, saw him smiling brightly, high as a kite, as if lost in his own world. The little girl scolded him because the situation was getting scary, and Felix just laughed, saying, "You're braver than me doing this sober." The little girl was forced to get out with Felix, begging her to go first. In her head, she just thought, "I'm going to be killed." Carly was acting strange, walking through the woods with her arms outstretched like a T-shape, spinning and singing loudly, "Mother Hilda knows all." Felix watched, muttering, "We're going to be killed, aren't we?" They reached the door. Carly opened it and motioned them to enter. The little girl found herself with two options: go inside or risk going into the woods, and she chose to go inside because at least there someone might find the body if something bad happened. Inside, everything was pitch black. even though it was a gloomy day outside, perhaps because the windows were covered with old paper. There was no furniture, just rotten wooden boards everywhere, and the pungent smell of decay filled the air like the smell of impending doom. This story is still unfinished as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story, where the shadows seem to have gone beyond the limits of reason, turning foolish adventures into vivid nightmares where curiosity can lead to the abyss of terror. As I told the story of the little girl's journey to Mother Hilda's house, now I will lead you through the peak moments, where reality merges with the mystical and what they witness could change their lives forever. In just 5 short seconds, I lost sight of him, my heart pounding like a war drum. These stories are not just narratives. They are scars on the soul, reminding us that sometimes the scariest thing is what we cannot explain. From the dark downstairs, they heard Carly's laughter, echoing from upstairs, making the little girl think she's busy. Then she realized there was an upstairs, and the thought flashed, "That's right. I'm going to die here. This is a weird house for weird rituals." She felt Felix was thinking the same thing, and he again begged her to go up first, while the stairs were right next to the front door, helping them avoid wandering through the terrifying downstairs area. When she looked up the stairs, the little girl almost died of fear. At the top, there was a girl about 14 years old with an unconcealed appearance pointing towards the upstairs hallway. The girl's face was heavily made up like Carly's, with eyes staring intently, perhaps with hostility. The little girl turned to look at Felix, and then the girl screamed, "Mother, Hilda is not waiting." That voice froze the little girl, but she was still forced to go up the stairs, each step heavy with fear. Inside the house, everything was strangely silent. No wind, no birds, no creaking of wooden floors, just a terrifying stillness, making the little girl clearly feel the negative energy currents enveloping her. Felix tried to comfort her by secretly pulling out a hunting knife, whispering, "I'll protect you. We'll get out of here safely." But those words didn't make the little girl feel any better. On the contrary, they only emphasized the lurking danger. When they reached the top floor, the other girl darted into a room. Carly stood at the end of the hallway next to a door with a radiant smile like a proud child. The little girl tried to walk towards it with a masculine bravery, a way of mocking herself, but after only a few steps, she felt nauseous, all her senses warning that what was behind that door was pure danger. Carly looked at the girl and said, "Mother Hilda will see you," then opened the door. Inside, what they saw initially looked like a small child with its back turned and eating something, perhaps chicken bones lying at its feet. But then, the terrifying detail emerged. Its legs were unusually large, wrapped in a ragged red cloth, and there was nothing covering the bottom. The little girl realized it wasn't a child, but an old person with sagging skin completely lacking vitality and form. When it turned, I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become invisible threads stretching through time and space, turning ordinary moments into haunting whispers where curiosity can open the door to eternal terror. As I told the terrifying encounter with Mother Hilda and the consequences it brought now, I will lead you through the layers of aftermath, where fear doesn't stop but continues to creep in and then shifts to a new chapter from the narrator's childhood, where affection and darkness intertwine in a turbulent school year. These stories are not just narratives. They are living memories reminding us that sometimes the darkness doesn't just lurk outside but also hides within our own hearts. After that encounter, the little girl tried to contact Carly via MSN Messenger for the next few days, hoping to find answers to what had happened. But Kohl's was closed for the night, the dim neon lights shining on the closed sign making me feel trapped. But each time she only received a short, terrifying message Mother Hilda never forgets. That message repeated about 10 times a day for 3 consecutive days like a persistent cold reminder, making her feel like she was being watched from afar. Finally, the little girl decided to forget about Carly. She didn't need that kind of trouble in her life anymore. They never met again, although she occasionally saw Carly at school. But Carly always avoided her, not even looking in her direction, as if a door had closed permanently. However, the terror didn't stop there. The little girl had only one more encounter with Mother Hilda, and it was right in her own yard. A large area with a fire pit, and the river nearby where she often built fires alone because Felix was her only friend, and she liked the drama of the flickering flames. One night when the fire was burning about 15 feet high, she was enjoying the moment. Then suddenly she took off her shirt and hung it on a 6-foot-long stick, starting to mutter nonsense words like a spontaneous ritual. She admitted it was a conscious act, but didn't understand why. Teenagers are just weird sometimes. Then from the other side of the fire, through the trees, and the small path that neighbors often used, she caught a glimpse of a small figure from the corner of her eye. At first she thought it might be a stray cat or a bear cub, but when she stopped and looked closely, it was Mother Hilda with her mouth wide open like a huge wound facing directly towards her. The only place still open was my sister's restaurant, so I was forced to go back even though I didn't want him to know my hiding place. The little girl was about to scream, but Mother Hilda growled, "No!" And immediately that fiercely burning fire went out completely, not a single ember left, only a pile of ash. Cold, dead ash. The little girl looked back and Mother Hilda was gone. That was a clear sign, and she decided enough is enough. Running into the house as fast as she could, her heart pounding as if it would burst. When she got inside, her mother asked why she wasn't building the fire anymore. The little girl was surprised because her mother rarely cared about what she did, and asked back, "Why are you asking?" Her mother replied that a cute girl who often wears black, clearly Carly, had just visited 5 minutes ago asking about her, and her mother had said she was building a fire in the backyard. The little girl felt a chill down her spine when she heard that, because Carly was on her way there. The little girl rushed upstairs to her room, still panicked, and sent a message to Carly via MSN to ask what the hell was going on. She thought she shouldn't get a response right away since Carly had just been at the door, but then a message popped up. "Mother Hilda likes you." Those words were like a declaration of ownership, making the little girl shiver as if that darkness had marked her forever. The little girl didn't tell anyone this story, considering it one of her unbelievable experiences, but when she met Felix again on a trip back to Newfoundland, she tried asking if he remembered Carly and that scary house. Felix looked at her with dead eyes, just said, "Mother Hilda is real, man. Don't get involved anymore," then turned and walked away as if just mentioning it was enough to awaken the fear. To this day, the little girl still can't explain those things, only knowing that they are like many other strange things that have happened to me, an unending chain of darkness. And then the story shifts to a longer chapter from 8th grade when she was 13 and discovering herself. As a bisexual boy, he admitted that some of his decisions at that time were quite foolish due to youth and surging emotions. 8th grade began and he was excited for the school year preparing for high school. Then a new boy named Liam joined the class. Tall, thin, 15 years old with curly black hair and blue eyes. Liam liked the same things as him: Gorillaz music, Steven Universe movies, and drawing. Immediately he had a crush on Liam like any 13-year-old teenager discovering their emotional identity with strong and confusing feelings. This story is still unfinished as the shadows still linger waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have crept into every corner of daily life, turning seemingly harmless friendships into haunting ghosts, where adolescent emotions intertwine with hidden terror, creating a network of fear from which there is no escape. As I approached the door, I saw him appear on the escalator, his eyes following me like a predator. As I told the encounters with Mother Hilda and the persistent haunting, now I will lead you through a new chapter from the narrator's childhood, where first love becomes a curse and the innocence of age 13 is exploited by darkness to expand. These stories are not just narratives, they are cracks in the soul reminding us that sometimes the scariest thing is people. The boy was quickly drawn to Liam, the feelings surging like a flood, but they were attending a religious school where he couldn't openly express his feelings or date. He had to suppress everything, hide his beating heart, and later he realized it was a great stroke of luck, a warning for what was about to happen. They became close friends, talking every day during lunch in class or via Instagram with Liam, who was perfect in his way, easy to talk to, funny and approachable, making the boy feel like he had found his other half. Just 2 weeks after the school year began, there was a field trip to the museum, a 3-hour bus ride. The boy thought it would be a great opportunity to be with Liam, and indeed Liam sat right next to him. Initially everything went well, they talked and laughed as usual. But then a subtle change began. Liam started stroking his knee, which made him laugh because it tickled, and he told him to stop. Instead, Liam moved his hand up his thigh and rubbed gently, making him feel a bit uncomfortable, but not daring to speak up. As a 13-year-old boy with a crush on Liam, He thought it was a way to show affection, so he chose to stay silent and not change seats. The same thing happened on the way back, and later he regretted not acting. Perhaps if he had, he would have avoided a long year of torment. I rushed into the restaurant, my breath coming in gasps, my body trembling with fear. About 3 weeks after the field trip during gym class, when they were resting in the gym, Liam asked him to hold his phone because his pants didn't have pockets. He agreed and put it in his pocket. When he was running around and needed to go to the bathroom, he remembered the phone. A little curious. Like any teenager wanting to discover interesting secrets about their crush, he decided to take a peek. The phone had no password, so he opened the gallery and was shocked to see about 250 photos of himself. There were photos of him in class, on the field trip photos Liam took with him, and even photos he didn't know about, as if he had been watching him from afar. The boy shivered at the strangeness, but at the same time the foolish part of him was happy that Liam seemed to like him so much. He brushed it off just like the previous times, telling himself it was just a way of showing affection. Increasingly, he realized Liam was very obsessed with him. At first, it was just small details like wearing the same color shoes or the same brand, but then it escalated to more specific things like t-shirts with bands or characters he liked. The boy still felt a bit more happy than scared, and once again he dismissed it, thinking it was Liam's way of showing admiration. By December 2016, the boy started to realize things were getting creepy and disturbing. It was after school when they were waiting for their parents in an empty classroom. His mother was often late, and Liam's mother was always busy, so they often stayed late. He sat in the front seat, Liam in the back. Liam put his backpack next to the door and asked him to get a book from the backpack because he was closer. He agreed and walked over. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have merged into every relationship, turning adolescent emotions into inescapable nightmares where innocence is exploited and darkness is used to expand, creating a cycle of fear and isolation. As I told the story of Liam's obsession and the initial signs of creepiness, now I will lead you through deeper layers, where the silence of the world around becomes a curse, and the boy has to face terror from the very person he once trusted. These stories are not just narratives. They are deep wounds reminding us that sometimes darkness hides within people's hearts, waiting to devour everything. When the boy bent down to rummage through Liam's backpack, suddenly, Liam walked up behind him and made a gesture that invaded his personal space. A sudden movement that startled him. He turned around asking Liam what he was doing, but Liam just laughed it off, saying he was just joking around and wanted to tease him. I quickly told the receptionist, the owner's daughter, about the terrifying situation that had just happened. At that moment, the boy remembered the previous times, the sneaky photos and the light touches, but this time he clearly realized that it was unacceptable. A feeling of discomfort rose. He decided not to stay there anymore, leaving the classroom immediately. Liam didn't follow, just sat there with an empty face as if nothing had happened. After leaving, the boy decided to report the incident to the principal, hoping someone would listen and help. However, the principal didn't believe him, saying he was just causing trouble and had no credible evidence. He promised to talk to Liam, but the boy knew it was just empty words, and disappointment flooded. Me. What a great school system we have here, he thought with a bitter tone. The next day, when this boy walked into class, Liam was sitting in his usual spot, saving the seat next to him with cold, dead eyes. The boy reluctantly sat down, only saying a simple "hey," and Liam was silent. After a few minutes, Liam whispered words into his ear that froze his blood. Threats that he had really reported him, and therefore he would turn his life into living hell. While I was telling her, I glanced outside, seeing him standing there, his eyes still fixed on me, as if waiting for an opportunity. And indeed, Liam began to carry out his threat. In the following weeks, Liam found ways to approach the boy every day, especially when he was alone, with actions that made him feel violated and hurt. Sometimes sneaky touches, sometimes worse. Even in crowded hallways, Liam still found ways to act discreetly, making the boy unable to relax. The situation became so bad that he stopped using the school bathroom, afraid that it would be the next place to be attacked. The boy tried reporting it again, but no one believed him. Everyone said Liam was a model student and couldn't do such things. He went home every day with bruises on his body and scars on his soul, but he didn't dare tell his parents, afraid they would think he was just seeking attention. Then one day, when he opened his locker, a piece of paper fell out. When he read the contents, he felt nauseous. It was a letter from Liam describing creepy and unacceptable intentions he wanted to carry out. He quickly gave it to the principal, but he still didn't believe him, saying the letter was unsigned, typed, and perhaps he wrote it himself to frame Liam. That accusation made the boy feel completely helpless. I overlooked the initial small warning signs, thinking everything would be okay. She led me to a secluded table in a corner where the warm light wasn't enough to dispel the rising anxiety. All his efforts were in vain. He wasn't a violent person, so he couldn't defend himself. Liam was a dangerous and manipulative person, always hiding his true nature behind the facade of an excellent and popular student, while the boy was isolated, less social, and unpopular. A perfect target for that darkness. Around February 2017, a small change appeared. The history teacher was fired for another incident unrelated to him, and the replacement was Mrs. Bennett, a wonderful young woman who made learning interesting and enjoyable. She was the only one who helped the boy get through the difficult time with Liam like a flickering light in the thick darkness. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have deeply embedded themselves into every thread of life, turning safe havens into dangerous traps where fragile support can be exploited by darkness to rise stronger than ever. As I told the story of the persistent torment from Liam and the appearance of Mrs. Bennett as a ray of hope, now I will lead you through the next layers, where fragile trust is tested and fear escalates to a peak, turning an ordinary day into an unforgettable nightmare. These stories are not just narratives. They are whispers of pain, reminding us that sometimes darkness never truly disappears but only waits for the moment to devour. She went to tell her father, the owner, while I held the baby tight, trying to stay calm. Mrs. Bennett quickly noticed the boy because he was always diligent and hardworking in class, but she also clearly saw the constant fatigue and sadness on his face. One day after class, she pulled him aside, gently asking why he always looked that way. A gesture of concern that surprised him a little, but also a signal of comfort. The boy hesitated, worried that she would be like everyone else, not believing him like the principal or other teachers. However, in her eyes he saw a rare sincerity. So he decided to tell her everything from the incidents, of the initial incidents to the current situation, like a flow of pain that had been suppressed for too long. Mrs. Bennett listened, her eyes wide and mouth agape in shock at what he told her. The school's neglect and the constant torment. Afterward, she gave him a warm hug, apologizing for everything that had happened, and promised that somehow things would be resolved to stop it. The boy pleaded with her not to report it to higher authorities, afraid that she would get into trouble, and Liam could make things worse, but Mrs. Bennett reassured him, saying she wouldn't let him be harmed anymore. For the first time in a long time, he left the classroom feeling truly happy, knowing that finally someone believed him, as if he had found a guardian angel. And indeed, Mrs. Bennett kept her word, always watching him between classes, letting her class out 5 minutes early to walk near his class and keeping an eye on him as he moved through the hallways. Small but meaningful actions like an invisible shield against the darkness. But he didn't wait. He walked into the dining area, his eyes scanning everywhere like he was hunting prey. Gradually, Liam noticed the surveillance. He stopped his invasive actions, knowing that Mrs. Bennett was always watching, and the boy started going to her room after school to wait for his mother, avoiding any opportunity for Liam to approach. The boy thought everything was over, but that was just an illusion. This was the last time Liam would try to carry out his terrifying actions. In late April, after a few months of peace since February, he was sitting in Mrs. Bennett's room waiting. Liam suddenly disappeared from sight, and he thought he had gone home early, even though he knew he was still at school at first. Mrs. Bennett said she needed to get documents from the teacher's lounge on the other side of the school, leaving him alone, a moment when he didn't expect danger. When she left, the boy needed to go to the bathroom in the opposite direction. On his way through the empty classrooms, he heard footsteps behind him, making him a little worried. Turning back, he saw no one, telling himself it was just his imagination. He continued walking about 50 feet further and entered a stall in the bathroom. He found me sat down in the chair next to me, so close I could feel his warm breath and the smell of his sweat. But then the bathroom door opened and the light suddenly went out. Not due to a power outage, because he clearly heard the switch. In complete darkness, he froze, his heart pounding, knowing that something bad was about to happen. Liam's voice echoed with a mocking sing-song tone. "Come out! I miss you so much!" The boy almost wanted to cry, but dared not make a sound, just sat perfectly still in the last stall. Liam's footsteps echoed, slowly approaching, checking each stall one by one like a predator stalking its prey. This story is still unfinished as the shadows still linger waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become an inseparable part of life, turning seemingly safe moments into dangerous abysses where fragile courage can ignite violence and the light of hope is swallowed by darkness in an instant. As I told the story of the final confrontation with Liam and the protection of Mrs. Bennet, now I will lead you through the most dramatic layers, where fear explodes into action and then shifts to a new chapter from the narrator's childhood where innocence is torn apart by a sudden darkness. These stories are not just narratives. They are cracks in the wall of memory reminding us that sometimes darkness doesn't just lurk but also lunges ready to sweep everything away. He asked my age, then said, "Creepy things? I want to conquer. Beautiful women like you. Want you to be the mother of my children. We will make cute babies." As the boy sat in the last stall of the bathroom, his heart pounding in the darkness, fear suddenly turned into a surge of intense energy. He realized he couldn't keep trembling like this. This was the moment he had to act. Liam was on the other side of the door laughing and teasing him from close range, thinking he was trapped. But that was his biggest mistake. He curled himself up ready, and when Liam opened the stall door, he used all his strength to kick the door back, aiming straight at him. Liam's cry of pain echoed as he fell backward, and the boy quickly pulled up his pants, rushing out of the bathroom while he tried to chase him. He ran down the hallway, but Liam was faster, rushing out and tackling him to the floor. He held a small knife in his hand, and in that chaotic moment, he managed to injure him on his hand and arm. He felt a burning pain, blood flowing, but then a scream echoed. It was Mrs. Bennet who had returned just in time. His voice echoed, making me want to vomit, but he added, "Don't worry, I'm a security guard. I will protect you and the baby." She rushed over, pushed Liam off him, and struggled to wrench the knife from his hand. Other teachers heard the commotion and ran out, witnessing the chaotic scene while Mrs. Bennet shouted loudly for someone to call 911. The boy lay there sobbing on the floor, his body covered in injuries, feeling like his whole world was collapsing. The police arrived and arrested Liam while he was taken to the hospital by ambulance. His parents were notified and arrived in a state of panic, hugging him tightly when they saw their son's condition. After his wounds were stitched up and he rested, his parents asked about everything. He told them everything, from the beginning to the end of the terrifying school year, and they hugged him, crying and apologizing for not realizing sooner. A rare moment of understanding and healing. From the school's side, he received a letter of apology from the principal, but it was just a way for them to avoid lawsuits, not sincere remorse. He didn't care anymore. The most important thing was that the abnormal person had been caught and couldn't harm him or anyone else. Liam was taken to a psychiatric facility, and from what he knows, he is still there. Then he reached across the table, touching near the baby, his hand like a dark shadow spreading. Those events changed him forever. Now at age 16, he is no longer the innocent boy he once was. He learned jujitsu to defend himself and always carries a small knife to feel safer. Mrs. Bennet was his savior. Without her, he probably wouldn't have survived or had to endure more. He is forever grateful to her, like an eternal light in the darkness. And then, the story shifts to another childhood memory when he was only about 7 to 10 years old, living in a green, peaceful area in London Chiswick, a place full of trees and fresh air with parking lots only 50 meters from the front door and a nursing home in front. This was an upscale town not usually prone to crime, so what happened was truly unusual. One night, as he was getting ready for bed and watching a movie with his parents, they heard the sound of the old wheels of a camper van rolling into the parking lot. In that quiet neighborhood, the unusual noise made them look out of curiosity, but only briefly before returning to their routine. Then, a faint cry, like a moan, echoed, making his parents raise their eyebrows and move closer to the window. I froze, my eyes fixed on that hand, my mind screaming that I had to protect my child at all costs. He, with childlike curiosity, squeezed in between them to look. They witnessed an elderly woman being pushed out of the van, a rough act by a burly but short man only slightly taller than the victim. That scene suddenly froze the air as if darkness had crept into their very home. This story is still unfinished as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become dark threads, tightly wrapped around childhood memories, turning ordinary moments into unhealed scars, where childlike curiosity opens the door to terror and the light of safety is swallowed by darkness in an instant. As I told the terrifying confrontation with Liam and the lasting consequences, Now I will lead you through a new chapter, where sudden violence intrudes into a peaceful life and vague memories become the source of eternal fear. These stories are not just narratives. They are ghosts from the past, whispering that sometimes darkness needs no reason to exist, only a moment of carelessness. When that man with his burly and short build grabbed something that looked like a bottle, the boy witnessed him use it to attack the elderly woman. He hit her hard on the head, making her fall, then pulled her up to repeat the action a few more times. A violent scene that froze the air as if time had stopped. Suddenly, the owner appeared. A man about 40-50 years old, over 6 feet tall, built like a wall, asking, "Is there a problem here?" The boy's parents were deeply shocked, quickly trying to shield him from the window gap, not wanting him to witness more. But he, with a strange mix of curiosity and worry, couldn't turn away. He snuck to the window next door where no one was blocking him to observe more closely, his heart pounding at what was happening. After that, the man started shouting drunkenly, ordering her to get lost, and she began to stumble away from the scene. She looked pathetic, her head injured with glittering shards, her white hair now stained dark, and she headed towards the small alley leading to the other side. The boy, unable to contain himself, ran to the bedroom window on the other side of the house to follow her, hoping she was safe. But his parents remained in their room, and to this day he still doesn't understand why they didn't do more. She disappeared around the corner, and he felt a surge of helplessness. He rushed to his parents' room, pulled his father's arm, and pleaded, "Dad, call the police." But his father didn't answer, just took him back to bed, tucked him in, then returned to the room with his mother, closing the door as if wanting to end everything. His words weren't perfect English, but the anger sharpened his voice like a knife blade. The camper van was gone, but the fear remained. He was worried that he would return. His father locked the door and window of his room tightly, but the locks were not enough to dispel the darkness in his mind. From then on, he had to sleep in his parents' room because of the nightmares haunted by that event. Recently, when he was 18, he tried asking his parents about it, but they refused to talk. His father said he absolutely didn't remember, and his mother only admitted there were screams but no blood, as if they were trying to erase the memory. He was firm about what he remembered, because everything was still clear in his head. The event not only confused him, but also sparked his interest in crime stories, and the scariest thing was the fog of forgetfulness his parents had. He was willing to bet that everything had happened, even though he couldn't find any reports or articles. He only hoped she was okay now, or in a better place, while he himself had to carry the burden of memory alone, feeling lonely in the darkness. Then, the story shifts to another childhood chapter, when he was the eldest of 4 siblings, 1 older brother and 2 younger sisters. The first time he met his guardian angel was when there were only 3 children and he was only 6 years old. We started texting regularly. He was thoughtfully interested in me, asking all sorts of things about my life. He replied, "Nothing, just talking to my beautiful woman." He had Turner syndrome, which made him short and look younger than his actual age, like a 4-year-old. That year he started 1st grade, his first time attending school in that state because kindergarten wasn't mandatory, and his mother didn't enroll him in preschool. The memory is a bit vague, but he clearly remembers crossing the playground to go home, then entering the small woods on the other side. It was a shortcut leading back to the trailer park where he lived. Usually he didn't go alone, but went with the 6th grade neighbor girl. But that day she went home early because she was sick. It was late autumn. He was wearing his favorite new jacket, and he remembers thinking the leaves changing color were beautiful, his eyes following a leaf gliding on the packed dirt ground. This story is still unfinished as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story, where the shadows seem to have become ghosts, lingering in memory, turning familiar paths into mazes of fear, where the innocence of childhood is tested by strange entities, and the light of safety can vanish in an instant. As I told the story of the sudden violent event, and the buried memories now, I will lead you through a deeper chapter from the narrator's childhood, where a simple walk home turns into a mysterious adventure, and the appearance of a stranger sparks eternal suspicion. These stories are not just narratives. They are whispers from the past, reminding us that sometimes darkness needs no reason to exist, only a moment of carelessness. The owner asked again, "This is a customer. Did she do something wrong?" The boy felt anxious walking home alone, knowing he had no other choice. He didn't know the way around, as this was the first time he had tried going alone, and Turner syndrome made it difficult for him to navigate. Doctors had explained that his mind couldn't draw maps, even though he could visualize the destination, but couldn't grasp how to get there. Usually he only had problems when he skipped a route for a few weeks, but this path should have been familiar as he had walked it 5 days a week for the past few months. Yet something strange happened, making him lost. He stared down at the path while other children ran past. What he remembers next is a surge of fear. He was lost in the woods without understanding why. Perhaps he had accidentally left the familiar path and wandered into the dense area, but he couldn't remember how long he had been walking. Maybe only about an hour, judging by the setting sun. He stood there rubbing his eyes and crying hysterically, feeling completely alone until he heard his voice. A strange voice asking, "Are you lost?" He looked up and nodded, and the man said, "Follow me." Without thinking, he followed. This was strange because normally he was always cautious and suspicious of strangers, especially as a child. He persisted, "No, she is mine. We are going to get married, see?" Later, he wondered why he did that. And the scariest thing was that he didn't even ask where he lived, as if he knew everything. He wished he could describe the man more clearly. Perhaps he was wearing a brown leather jacket, blue jeans, average height, and short hair. But it's all just vague speculation. What he was sure of was that he looked strangely normal. Nothing stood out. He didn't hold his hand or say comforting words. He just led the way while he tried to keep up on the bumpy path, gasping for breath from exhaustion. When they reached the edge of the woods, he smiled and said, "It's over there," pointing in the direction he needed to go. He was too shy to say thank you. Just nodded, smiled, and then dashed out onto the gravel road leading home. But before running, he turned back to look, and he was gone in the blink of an eye. When he got home, his mother immediately asked why he was late, and she was about to call the police because she was worried. He stammered that he was lost, but before he could say more, his mother looked at him with a worried expression. He gave a twisted smile as if warning me to be quiet and play along with his game. Then his mother asked, "Where's your jacket?" He felt his head and realized that he had been wearing his favorite jacket like a cape, tied around his neck with the hood, but now it was gone. He remembered tripping a few times while following the man, and perhaps it fell off without him noticing. His mother angrily grabbed his hand and led him to look for it, but the jacket was nowhere to be found. She became even more upset when she remembered the price of it, and he felt his heart break from the loss. That evening, he thought it was the worst day of his life. But the next morning, Saturday, he woke up early to play with his younger brother in the front yard. His mother reminded him not to stay out too long because he didn't have his jacket, and he rushed to the door, but then stopped abruptly, his eyes wide with surprise. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story, where the shadows seem to have become living entities, creeping through every crack of memory, turning ordinary moments into terrifying stories where unexpected luck can... I found some comfort from the owner's solid presence, but fear still surrounded me. Hide a deep darkness and journeys that seemed like salvation lead to remote and mysterious places. As I told the story of getting lost in the woods and the strange encounter with the man, now I will lead you through the next layers, where a loss is strangely returned and a cross-country trip turns into a haunting escape. These stories are not just narratives, they are whispers of fate reminding us that sometimes darkness doesn't just pursue, but also invites us in. The boy stopped abruptly at the front door, his eyes wide, when he saw his favorite jacket lying right there, neatly folded and looking completely undamaged. It seemed not tired from the journey, still clean and intact, as if it had never been lost. He quickly picked it up, put it on, and ran into the house to show his mother. She looked at him with a confused expression, asking where he found it, and he simply replied, "On the porch." She sat in silence for a moment, trying to find an explanation, then said that surely one of the other children had found it and brought it back. But neither he nor his mother truly believed that. A feeling of doubt crept in, as if some force was intervening. Then the story shifts to a new chapter when he was 12 years old. I pleaded, "Please leave me alone, I just want to eat dinner." At that time, his family lived in a rented house, had no car, and his mother and her boyfriend were both unemployed. Financial problems was just a gentle way of saying desperate. The electricity and water were shut off, and they were only 2 weeks away from being locked out by the authorities, forced onto the streets. His mother didn't know what to do or where to go while everything seemed to be falling apart. His mother's boyfriend, one of the talented boyfriends she had, came up with his clever idea. His family had never really traveled far from their small county, let alone out of their tiny town, but he convinced everyone that this was an opportunity. A week before summer break on a late Tuesday afternoon, his mother rushed into the living room where they were watching TV by borrowing electricity from the neighbors and announced, "You kids need to pack your things, but not much. We're going cross-country for an adventure." They packed and set off somehow, but the reality was not like an adventure. They squeezed into an old two-door Ford Scorpio from the 80s with his mother, her boyfriend, 4 children, and a family friend. Their luggage only included camping gear, tools, clothes, just enough to barely survive. That evening, he learned how they would fund the trip, taking advantage of emergency assistance programs in towns like meals at relief camps, gas money, food stamps, cash, or help from churches. He sneered, "Oh, funny girl, we're just kidding." The plan was to find a place to pitch a tent and stay overnight. The initial camping nights were quite fun, even though they were crammed into a tent meant for only 4 people. They got to run around and shout, "Be real kids," but gradually the novelty faded. The boyfriend constantly complained. His brother snored loudly, and the children were irritable from being stuck in a cramped car for over 16 hours a day, only wanting candy and causing trouble. Finally, they reached a church in the middle of nowhere, following someone's directions. The dark dirt road made them get a little lost, and when they arrived, it was already dark with no other cars around. They parked the car, the headlights shining on the old building, a one-room church isolated in the woods. The adults were discussing whether to pitch the tent when he looked up and saw a man appear from the other side of the building, perhaps where he lived. He walked up to the window of his mother's boyfriend's car, listening to the familiar lie he had used elsewhere. Without saying another word, he moved to the back window where he and his siblings were sitting, his gaze making the air heavy. I repeated, "I don't know you. Please go away." This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story, where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities, lingering in every corner of life, turning moments of kindness into haunting questions, where unexpected luck can be the mask of a deep darkness, and repeated encounters spark fear from deep within the subconscious. As I told the story of the arduous cross-country trip and the mysterious appearance of the man at the church now, I will lead you through the next layers, where kindness is bestowed in a strange way and gradual recognition turns into a prolonged nightmare. These stories are not just narratives, they are dark threads connecting the past to the present, reminding us that sometimes darkness doesn't just watch, but also returns, bringing unwanted answers. When the back window of the car was rolled down because the air conditioning was broken and the air was stuffy, the man with a warm smile approached. He asked the boy, "How are you kids doing tonight?" clearly addressing him, his voice gentle, which gave him a little comfort. He replied, "I'm fine, thank you," in a polite tone. He nodded and muttered to his mother's boyfriend, "I'll be right back," before disappearing for a moment. When he returned, he handed the boyfriend enough money to buy gas a hotel room and eat at McDonald's. A generous gesture that stunned everyone. "The owner supported me. She told you to leave now." He stepped back, looked at the boy's brother, and said, "Snore as loud as you want," as if he knew every little detail about them. Then he gave each child a full-size chocolate bar, bringing unexpected smiles in the middle of the night. The adults looked at each other in shock, not believing what had just happened, while the boy smiled, feeling like a miracle. But as soon as he disappeared behind the church, the boy realized that was the man from the woods long ago. He was strangely certain, even though he couldn't clearly remember his face, but his intuition told him it was him unmistakable. The next day, they returned to the church because the boyfriend thought he could get a little more from that man. But this time, there was someone else there, and he looked at his mother as if she was talking to a ghost when she asked about the man from the night before. He insisted that no one could have been there at that hour because the church had no living quarters and didn't even have an active congregation. He was only there to take care of the plants. A strangely normal explanation, but it only added to the mystery. Then the story shifts to a new chapter when he was 24 years old. Finally, he said, "She's just joking, she loves me. I will wait for you, beautiful woman." At that time, he worked as a counter clerk at a convenience store, trying to figure out his life's direction. But the financial instability seemed to be his own fault. Not prosperous, not certain. He loved the job, but hated the location. A 30-minute drive from home, and he had no car and no bus went through. To earn minimum wage, he had to rely on someone to drive him to and from work every day. And getting home around 1 in the morning was really difficult, as few people were willing to drive that far. It was one of those bad days when he didn't know how to get home. No one could pick him up. and it was the end of the month. He had no money left for a taxi. Even though there was food around, he was starving because he couldn't buy anything. That afternoon, the store was empty. He stood behind the counter, his mind wandering about his side job and craving the ice cream in the freezer while the stress level rose, almost overwhelming him. Then the doorbell rang and he looked up to see a man walk in. He had a feeling of recognizing him, although he couldn't remember clearly, but his intuition told him. He walked up to the counter with a calm expression, placed a roll of money on the counter, and just said, "Go buy yourself some ice cream." Then he turned and left immediately, leaving him stunned. Asher also lived in the dorm, so inviting me to his room to meet up seemed natural. Then he stood up and left the table, but his gaze still left the feeling of being watched. He whispered no way as he realized. That was the man from the woods, and later the church. He didn't look any older than when he was 6, with the familiar soft smile. He stepped closer, picked up the roll of money and began to count. This story is still unfinished as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become immortal ghosts, creeping through layers of memory and legend, turning moments of kindness into chilling questions, where vague recognition can open the door to ancient myths and unexpected kindness hides a deep fear. As I told the strange encounters with the mysterious man and the unexpected support in daily life, now I will lead you through the final layers, where personal story merges with ancient legends and terror from the past returns, bringing whispers of fate. These stories are not just narratives. They are dark threads connecting the real world with mystical shadows, reminding us that sometimes we never truly escape their watch. When the boy counted the roll of money, he realized the exact amount was enough to buy an ice cream and pay for a taxi home, as if it was prepared specifically for him, a strange gift in a moment of despair. After he left, the owner asked if I was okay, then went into the employee break room to tell my sister. He couldn't explain why he always recognized him, even though he couldn't clearly describe his face or any details. But every time he appeared, he was sure it was the same person. Perhaps there are countless more logical reasons, a random coincidence, or just imagination, but he insists this is not a made-up story, completely different from other stories he has told. He feels like he has had the honor of meeting his guardian angel 3 times, and while that brings comfort, it also sends shivers down his spine, a little fear creeping in. Can he be blamed for that feeling? Certainly not, because who can face something strange without feeling a chill down their spine? Then the story shifts to another chapter where the shadows of legend begin to merge, leading us into ancient myth. The legend of La Llorona, the Weeping Woman. This story originates from ancient beliefs like all other legends, myths, and folk creatures. It is associated with the Aztec goddess Cihuacuatl, a half-human, half-serpent entity, a symbol of land fertility and childbirth, also the protector of women who died in childbirth. In Aztec mythology, Cihuacuatl abandoned her son, another god, at a crossroads, and occasionally she returns to that place to weep and regret. From documents gathered from the testimonies of indigenous people who survived the conquest, we know that about 10 years before the Spanish arrived at the Aztec capital for several weeks, in the middle of the night, an unidentified woman screamed and wept. Her cries echoed through the streets and canals of the city built on a lake, a place that no longer exists, with words full of despair. "Oh, my children, we will lose everything. Oh, my children, where shall I take you?" We waited another 2 hours for my sister's shift to end, each minute passing like a prolonged nightmare. No one dared to go out for fear, and those supernatural events were considered bad omens signaling the arrival of the conquerors. Although history can be lost, and some people argue that this is just a later interpretation, the truth still leaves people stunned. After the conquest, when Aztec culture merged with Spanish culture, the legend continued to evolve. During the colonial period, residents of the capital told of a woman in a white dress emerging from the lake, surrounded by thick fog and a veil, wandering through the streets at night weeping for her lost children. Often drunkards from late-night bars would encounter her, a seductive figure with an enchanting voice, persuading them to take her home. In a dazed state, they would follow her, hoping for a night. I continue this story where the shadows seem to have become living entities, creeping through layers of legend and reality, turning ancient whispers into haunting warnings, where vague recognition can lead us into the abyss of fear and strange sounds become calls from the other side. As I told the legend of La Llorona and the unexpected encounters with the guardian angel, now I will lead you through the next layers, where the story shifts from ancient myths to chilling personal experiences, where darkness doesn't just tell stories, but also whispers directly into our ears. These stories are not just narratives, they are doors leading into terror, reminding us that sometimes the truth is scarier than legend. When the woman, La Llorona, led the unfortunate men to the water's edge, the real horror began. When we packed up and went to the car, he appeared out of nowhere again saying, "I will take the beautiful woman and the baby home now. Get in the car." She floated on the surface of the water, not touching the ground, then suddenly turned back slowly, removing her veil. In one version of the legend, instead of a human face, she revealed a stark white skull with two black eye sockets like abysses, and her dress, once pure white, was now ragged and decayed, as if worn down by time and pain. In other stories, instead of a skull, she had a horse's head with glowing red eyes, emitting a strange light that made anyone who witnessed it feel their soul freeze. The men, now completely sober from the shock, could only stand there facing her pure darkness. Those men, if they were lucky enough to survive, would fall into a state of madness, their minds haunted by that image, leading to uncontrollable fever and persistent hallucinations, ultimately claiming their lives within a few days. But even so, their stories were passed down like a vague warning. In reality, this legend primarily exists through oral tradition, from generation to generation, and is perhaps just a cautionary tale meant to deter wrongdoings like excessive drinking, encouraging people to live better lives. Nevertheless, in the myriad variations of La Llorona in different towns, the common thread is always the reverence for women who lost children, a legacy from Aztec beliefs, where death in childbirth was compared to the death of a warrior, and their souls served the sun for 4 years before being reborn as butterflies. The loss of a child is a universal pain, and from there the legend has transformed, becoming the image of punished souls. Those who have harmed children will wander forever carrying the burden of guilt and suffering. The most popular version tells of a woman who drowned her children in the river due to anger madness or often because of a cheating husband. I panicked, but my sister appeared like an angel from the car behind, saying, "She's coming with her sister." From there, the legend spread, and today you can find stories of La Llorona in small towns in Mexico, especially near rivers or lakes during the rainy season. Ask any elderly person there, and they will surely have their own story, as if the darkness is still whispering through their narratives. Then the story shifts to a new chapter, where the shadows are no longer legends but become daily reality. A music room in the basement where I used to live. It was the only room in the house that hadn't been completed, and I never understood why. My father always left the door open, so the warm air could spread, as the room was often strangely cold. I lived in the basement with my bedroom and bathroom right next to it, so I spent most of my time there exposed to that strange atmosphere. I had 3 memorable experiences in the bathroom. The first time while showering, I heard 3 loud knocks echoing through the sound of the running water, so much so that I thought my parents were outside the door. I shouted, "Wait," and quickly got out to open it, but there was no one there. He still tried, "No, my woman has to come with me. Get in the car." When I asked everyone in the house, they all denied it. The same happened the following times. 3 clear knocks, but no logical reason. In addition, our dogs, 2 of them, would often run to the music room door and bark incessantly, refusing to enter, just sitting there and growling as if facing something invisible. They always reacted that way, making me wonder if they could sense something we couldn't see. My father was very insistent that the room door should always be open. That was his rule. So when I found the door completely closed one time, I asked everyone, but they all denied it. He was the only one who used that room, and he always emphasized keeping the door open, yet it had closed on its own. The last experience that sent shivers down my spine happened one morning around 6:15 when I walked out of the bathroom. I heard a low growl from the music room, as if an animal was hiding. I stopped, listened carefully, trying to tell myself it was probably the wind or something else, but I was sure it wasn't. It came from that room, and nothing logical could explain it. My sister was decisive. "I will handle this." This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story, where the shadows seem to have become familiar entities, creeping through every corner of daily life, turning ordinary sounds into whispers of fear, where curiosity can open the door to unexplainable phenomena, and memories of ancient myths merge with modern reality. As I told the legend of La Llorona and the strange experiences in the music room, now I will lead you through the next layers, where the personal story continues to expand from mysterious knocks to a chilling trip where darkness doesn't just exist but also takes shape, touching our souls. These stories are not just narratives. They are invitations from the abyss, reminding us that sometimes reality can hide ghosts right in our own homes. I quickly ran upstairs to pull my father down, hoping he could hear the strange growling from the music room and witness something. But when we returned, everything was silent. The sound had disappeared as if it had never existed, leaving only a heavy silence and lingering questions. I told myself that perhaps no one or nothing had died in this house, as I didn't remember any tragic events like that, but the thought of a ghost attached to an object, like my grandmother's old keyboard still sitting there in the room, sent shivers down my spine. Perhaps that was what was keeping the darkness there, a piece of memory that couldn't let go. Then the story shifts to a new chapter when I was about 15 years old, and I went with my best friend Joe's family to Utah to visit his relatives. We quickly got in the car and left the engine roaring like a sigh of relief. Joe and I were so close that I could freely enter his house, rummage through his fridge, and was almost considered part of the family. We had traveled together a few times before, so this trip wasn't too strange. Joe's family wanted us to split our time between his grandparents' house and his aunt and uncle's house, mainly to make his grandparents happy and feel cared for. His grandparents' house was boring in a childlike way. A traditional elderly couple's house with old furniture, no exciting games, and only a small TV in the basement with a few basic channels and an outdated VCR. The story takes place in the basement, where we often hung out. When you went down the stairs, you would immediately see a large closet on the right, used for storing food and supplies, and opposite was the living room, with 70s-style orange carpet leading to other rooms. At first, nothing made me feel scared. The house looked normal, and I wasn't someone who easily panicked or believed in ghosts. But on the second night, things started to change. I was sleeping on the sofa, and Joe was sleeping on the floor right next to me after we finished watching the movie. Cool Runnings on VHS tape, it was the only good movie. Joe was sleeping like a log, so I turned off the TV and tried to relax. The next day, my sister told me the owner held him back when he tried to grab my arm as I got in the car, and he was banned from the mall permanently. Suddenly, from the corner of my eye, I saw a bright orb, something like a ball of light, hovering in the air. I turned to look closely, and it slowly faded and disappeared. I don't believe in spirit orbs or anything like that, and to this day, I don't know what to think about it, but at the time, I just found it very strange. So I shook my head and tried to go back to sleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up vaguely feeling confused because there was a strange light shining into the living room. I thought someone must be up, so I turned to look, and then it shook me to my core. The light was coming from the closet door, and there, standing tall, was a solid black mass in the shape of a human. It had no face or features, just a distinct outline of a person like a living shadow. I stared in horror, trying to understand what was happening. After about 5 seconds of freezing, the black shadow turned and walked deeper into the closet, as if disappearing into the darkness. At that moment, my fear exploded, and I rolled like rolling over to Joe, shaking him awake while whispering urgently, "Wake up! Wake up!" Now in my mid-20s, my life is still drifting, unable to figure out a career path. Joe woke up with an irritated voice, What? I quickly told him there was something in the closet, but I knew Joe didn't believe in supernatural things, and perhaps he just thought I was dreaming or joking. This story is still unfinished, as the shadows still linger, waiting to reveal more secrets. I will stop here, but be prepared, because terror always finds a way to return. I continue this story, where the shadows seem to have become eternal entities, creeping through every moment of life, turning ordinary moments into haunting whispers, where doubt can open the door to hidden ghosts and memories of legends merge with reality, making us unable to distinguish between dreams and truth. As I told the strange experiences in the basement and the encounter with the terrifying black shadow, now I will lead you through the next layers, where fear still lingers and new adventures unfold, bringing new shadows full of mystery and creepiness. These stories are not just narratives, they are dark threads connecting the past to the present, reminding us that sometimes darkness is always lurking, waiting for the moment to reveal itself. Joe, with a skeptical look, walked towards the closet, glancing deep inside as if checking a secret. He looked closely at every corner, then turned off the light, his voice sounding indifferent. "Hey, there's nothing in here." Joe's words were like a knife cutting through the tension, but I knew he was just trying to rationalize everything, not wanting to admit that there might be something beyond understanding.